actually pay off in a couple of years, 2.5 years, but you have debt falling off. And so when we look at addressing the needs of the city for water and sewer, we have to ensure that we look at this from a suitability standard. What is the most suitable way for you guys to move forward? And how do you pay for this? And Harrah is in a unique position in the state of Oklahoma as far as your potential future residential growth. When I say unique, you're one of maybe, I can count the number of cities on my hand that have the type of growth that you're going to potentially be looking at from a percentage basis. In essence, you may very easily double your utility counts from where they were 3 years ago within 10 years. There are very few communities in this state that is doing that. And we represent 125, 130 cities all over the state. So you have to plan. You have to develop how you're going to address infrastructure, but at the same time, sitting on your side, you want to do this the most efficiently and take advantage of building up your utility system as far as customers, because as you add customers, you add revenues coming in on all utilities but water and sewer. Those water and sewer revenues in turn are obviously applied to the cost of providing water and sewer, which is not only just operations, but it's the capital infrastructure that you're going to have to put into play. And so when you look at that breakout, you on the separate page, I don't want to go to that yet, but you have to look at where do those dollars go as you add hundreds and hundreds of additional residential customers within the city of Harrah. So the page that I have in front of you is what we analyzed, and we had multiple discussions with members of staff, with members of council over the last year, essentially, where we look at how do you pay for these necessary needs as far as utilities in proper size lines for water and sewer, in addressing lift stations, pump stations, items like that, so that as your population grows over the next decade, how can we pay for this? What's the most efficient way to actually address these needs? Because you are adding customers over time, if you added 250 customers a year, that's going to generate so much in revenue, assuming a residential customer, an average customer uses 5,000 gallons, you would generate off water and sewer $1,000 a year. So if you had 250 customers, that's 250,000. And the thought process, understandably, might be, if not knowing the details, because let's just build the lines when we get the money. At $250,000, you're going to be doing very small pieces that you're not going to be able to even come close to catching up with the growth that you're going to sustain. So what you have to look at, like every other governmental entity within the state, is you have to address and advance fund those projects, those water and sewer lines and so forth, get those done. And then you actually are in a position to address the higher demand that you have on your city by adding those homes at a clip of 150, 200, 250 homes a year. Harrah has grown quite a bit over the last 20 years. It's a different era. You have the Kickapoo Turnpike that obviously has been completed for a while. And as we say, Harrah is going to grow despite whatever anybody that would be support or against growing, it's growing. And so part of this is to address the advanced funding of the needs of water and sewer lines. It's not inexpensive to add larger size sewer lines, not expensive to add additional water lines. But we look at this as a plan for the next 10 years, 20 years, and how would you be able to address funding these particular infrastructure needs? Right now, the market has varied over time. Interest rates were at U.S. historical lows up until about a year and a half ago. COVID came in, had supply chain shortages, and we have the inflation that the Open Market Committee, Federal Reserve has tried to address with 10 straight Fed fund rate increases at every one of their last 10 or 11 meetings. And so they've raised rates. And that rates don't always follow exactly. It's not completely linear to whatever they raise the Fed fund rate to. Prime's based on Fed fund rate. Your credit cards are based on Fed fund rate. Mortgage loans are based on, but not exactly one-to-one. Now, as far as financing for municipalities, tax exempt type financing, it hasn't gone up quite as much percentage-wise as we've seen in the Fed fund rate, but it's a matter of you have to address these projects and try to access the market when the interest rates are as low as possible, but at the same time, you have to look at inflation. And there was a period of about a decade where inflation was 3%, but you could borrow at 2.5 or right under 3. So you actually could borrow money and beat inflation. And so you either decide when you do projects, you're just not gonna build it all, which saves you interest, period, or you know you have to build, but you build to where you actually are borrowing at a rate that is less than inflation, and you address the projects now. It's a little different. The rates are higher, borrowing rates, but the investment rates are also higher today. So when we had rates at 2.5%, 3% on 20-year loans, day in and day out for almost a decade, we had interest earning rates of 0.1%. And so you're upside down there. You could generate a lot of savings, but you couldn't earn anything off of those savings. What we're looking at here is to try to get you to the market to where you can beat inflation and borrow before rates go up anymore. And so that's the big picture. If you look, like I said, on the left half of this handout, you'll see the debt that you have existing right now. And we added 2 loans back in 2020 and 2022 that have addressed various utility line projects over the last almost 3 years, 2.5 years. And then you see in yellow is potentially, and this is what's in front of you tonight, is a resolution authorizing submitting the application, the authority submitting the application, HPWA, to the Oklahoma Water Resources Board to borrow up to and not exceeding $10 million. And that $10 million is to be used for, and I'm gonna allow for the mayor, anyone on your side to address any questions regarding the projects, but there are significant sewer lines that have to be addressed to accomplish residential growth and to a certain degree accomplish commercial growth, because the more growth you have in those areas, the more dollars that come back to the city and give you the ability to fund additional operations in every aspect of your city. It returns dollars back to the city, because in Oklahoma, the actual utilities that most communities have water and sewer sanitation. And those particular enterprises, along with sales tax, revenues from utilities, along with sales tax revenues, are what come back into the community that do obviously everything. This is not a governmental fund accounting 101, but this speaks louder for Harrah than almost any community we work with. And we work with communities that are over 100,000 and those that are under 1,000 population. We're all over the state. And so you are in a position to where if you generate a certain base in additional customers, that in turn will help grow Harrah and accomplish other types of needs, public safety, uh, parks and rec or quality of life type projects. The larger you grow, the more you generate in those particular revenue generating departments, and that's water and sewer and sanitation. You also generate, as you grow retail wise, you generate more sales tax dollars that come in that are filtered into accomplishing all the needs of the city. You're not gonna meet every need, not a city in Oklahoma meets every need, but you got that, you have the potential with your growth to address a lot of needs most cities in Oklahoma will not be able to address. Because a lot of cities in Oklahoma are landlocked. They cannot grow any more than they are now. They can grow retail potentially, but you have an opportunity here, and this is one of the steps towards that. And so, right now, if you see in yellow, interest rates have come up. I wish we could have stayed in the 2.5 to 3.5 range, but rates have come up over the last year and a half. We are now, if we were to close a deal with, between the OWRB and the HPWA today, and we're looking at water and sewer lines, we're talking 40, 50-year-old assets. We hope they last that long. They will hopefully last at least 30 years. That's the standard. The lender, OWRB, Oklahoma Water Resources Board, will loan you the funds, and they will expect that you provide that the assets are gonna have that life. They will do a fixed rate loan up to 30 years, and that's what we're looking at here. Today, if we could close it today, and this market changes, it was a week and a half ago, Mayor might be looking at this, we were looking at about a 415 to a 420. Today, we're about 15, 20 basis points higher. It'll change 3 or 4 more times before we close this. It'll go up and down, but today, we're at a 4.35%. We're getting into the weeds, but that basically is what we assist you with, is trying to get you dollars at the lowest rate possible for your particular projects. And so today, highlighted in yellow, you'll see that's what the actual annual debt payments would be on that particular loan, addressing approximately 10 million for various water and sewer projects, what the impact that would be on the city. And so when you add the new debt on top of your existing debt payments, you see the column next to that is in yellow. That would be the new total aggregate debt payments of all your debt as they fall off over the years. So you stop there and you say, okay, that's a lot of debt annually. I don't know how we're gonna address that. You have two methods of paying this back. You have a 2-penny sales tax that was made permanent a couple years ago, and that sales tax is to be used for essentially any capital need of the city. And so in the past, we have used that sales tax to help make payments on water and sewer projects through this type of financing that we just went over. And so those are the revenues that are projected in green, is what those revenues from 2-penny will generate. What we've seen statewide, and especially here, is we've had tremendous growth during COVID in sales tax. Everyone was concerned that everyone was going to stop buying, and this just addresses sales tax, not use tax. So there was a lot of movement to actually move over to what generates use taxes, online sales, Amazon sales. Everyone during COVID obviously did not want to get out of the house, but it created a whole different buying philosophy for everyone. So communities saw tremendous growth in their sales tax. You saw over 5% growth for the last 2.5 years. I didn't bring that with me tonight, but you had substantial growth over the last 2 years. If we project that you're gonna grow at 5% for a couple more years, which has been way over that figure, and then just grow at 2% for the years after that, that you, revenue-wise, next 30 years, you could very easily generate about $74 million in sales tax. That 74 million is what you're gonna use to make the actual debt payments if you were to look at this side by side. That's why you see the black column, which is, you're in the black, after you make all those debt payments to address everything I just spoke of over the last 20 minutes, is you still have almost $35 million you can address other projects and other capital needs of the city. Now, this is 30 years, but that's about $1 million a year. Now, that's on sales tax alone. And this doesn't include just general growth from adding more retail. This is more inflationary type growth with sales that you would have within your community and what you generated additional sales just on what you have today. Nothing going forward. So we've taken a very conservative stand on this. Next to the black column, then we have cumulative excess that's associated with the sales tax. And the next column is what's key. It's in green. You're going to have a certain amount of growth within the adding of utility customers over the years to come. And so I want to stop here. I want you to move over to your other sheet. And this is where we analyze what your existing water and sewer rates are. And we just address water and sewer as to what you currently charge. I think you have a 4% annual inflationary adjustment each and every year. And so what we looked at is what are the revenues that would be generated and how would you use those revenues if you were to add 250 houses a year for the next decade. You're essentially adding 2,500 homes. Whether that all happens at the pace of 250, you may have some years you're at 100, and some years you may be at 400 homes, but just assuming 250 homes going forward, what kind of revenues would that generate for the community, and how would you carve up that additional revenue? Because you're gonna have 2,500 additional potential residences that are on your utilities. It's gonna cost more to operate your existing treatment facilities, your collection distribution lines, and so you're gonna have to allocate so many of those dollars towards that. But you also have the capital infrastructure that's associated with those particular water and sewer services, which I've addressed, that you've got loans outstanding. We're looking about at adding $10 million worth of additional sewer line work to accomplish all the growth. And we are looking at what's called transfers of general fund, which is essentially addressing the cost of services outside of the authority. City council, city management, staff sets what this will be. But this is a template, but it's more of a game plan. It's a game plan that can't be shelved, because you have to look at this in each and every year, say, how are we gonna allocate the revenues as they're coming in, and at the same time, because we have to be responsible to our community, to our citizens, that we put the dollars in the right spot, but understanding that it's gonna cost so much to run the utilities as they grow, so much to keep the infrastructure going, the water plant, the water, the sewer, and so forth. And then you also have the cost of, no pun intended, because I'm getting ready to talk about police and fire, that you have public safety, you have more people, you have to build your staff in every area, community development and quality of life, community across the board. So as you grow, you have to say, you can't put blinders on, you have to see how this all fits. Because you have to know, all right, we're growing, we need to add here as we're growing in population, because 2,500 homes could be 6,000, 6,500 additional citizens within the community that today you would look at, and I'm not your finance director or budget director, those days are gone for me. That's way back in my history. But you're gonna have to address that. And how do you staff? And so we put together the model so that you can look at how do you actually fund those particular needs. And you can allocate this, but each year you have to look ahead to the next year and say, all right, we've got an increased burden on police and fire. We have increased burden on our utility system. So if you look at 2024 column on this one sheet, you can, right, we just initially, because capital infrastructure's a key element now, as you're completing out your growth of your utility system, that we, as an example, allocated half the revenues that you would generate if you had 250 homes at your current water and sewer rates. Half of that revenue would go to capital. The other half would be split between operations of the authority, the water and sewer, and the other half would go to general fund to address those particular departments under general fund. And so this particular analysis addresses what you need to do for the next 10 years and supports a very tough decision, which is to continue to incur debt, understanding that it's going to be years down the road, and you have all different demographics within Harrah. You have different ages. Things that are important 20 years down the road won't be as important for me as it will be for my son. And so you have to think, what is Harrah for 30 years, or 20 years, or at least in this case, 10 years out. So I ran a lot by you. I didn't take a breath, which is what I typically don't do. I have water back here. I'll be glad to answer any questions. Understanding that these are numbers, but it's a basic concept. It's not getting into the details of the engineering of any one project. You're gonna have all kinds of challenges going forward in your various departments. But what is key is that when I say you're in a very unique position, that you have the ability to accomplish quite a bit in Harrah. It's a matter of just holding to a plan. And I'm not saying anything listed here, especially the allocation of how you're gonna allocate your revenues as you grow in the utility system, but you need to constantly look at where are you at with sales tax, where are you at with utility revenues. And the toughest things, I used to, my earlier days, I was an auditor, and then I was a finance director, and if you're in that area, in that field, you can't step back very often. If you're in that, it's like being an engineer. You just get caught up with the numbers, and this, I've droned on forever, and this is big picture. And so you have to step back and look at what is the best for a community, and you are one of very few communities that have the ability to do this. There are very few that fall into your realm as far as the magnitude of additional customers, but you have to be responsible, obviously, to service everyone. And so I'll stop, take a drink of water, and answer questions.
Better get that drink of water.
Okay.
First off, this sheet.
Yes.
Is there, in 2031, the amortization of the 2020 note
Yes.
jumps up? Is there something special that we just apply more, or the payments get 3 times as big right there?
When you're talking like 610,000.
Yeah, when you go from
287
287 a year to 610,000 to 611, what happens? It happens on these 2 notes, the 2022, so I'm figuring it may just be amortized that way. I don't
Well,
know.
we're amortizing it that way for a reason.
Okay.
Is because we know there's only so many dollars available to make actual debt payments, so when debt falls off, we try to
You
wrap
increase
around,
it.
we try to increase it.
But not as much fell off as you increased. That's what threw me off. not as much monthly payments, I should say, fell off, that you increased, but you may know better than I do. I'm just looking at
No,
it going,
I'd be glad, yeah.
I'm going, you know, I see where 151,000 fell off, 83,000, 32,000 per year, and then the 100,000 came off. So maybe it is 400,000 or close, and you added that to it. So I'm good with that now that you explain that. It happens again on the next note, 2022. It happens in 2031. I'm good with that now.
Okay,
So, if in fact, in here, from this conversation,
okay.
2025, the homes drop off. We really don't get any more homes building. Can we pay this note still with the 2-cent sales tax? And how much trouble can we get into? I realize we have to manage it every month, or every year, but how much trouble we can get into if this really drops off? I don't think it will, but.
No, but it's gonna be an easy answer.
Okay.
Is you have 2 pennies that are coming in. This is the area where you have to make this commitment that if all of a sudden the building stops, then you're gonna have to address those debt payments with a significant use of the remaining sales tax, because as you see.
Which you kind of looked at.
Yes, and we looked at, and what we constantly looked at is what is the additional revenue, what does sales tax generate from the 2 pennies? What is let's say you only grow by 2 years, but you've added a cumulative amount of revenue to where you're at $540,000 if you just have a couple of years. You're bringing in 540. We would first look there to cover anything that would happen going forward. If you just stopped at 540, that's why it has to be looked at every year.
Every year.
Is to see, because this plan doesn't get shelved, because you have to look at this and say, all right, how are we doing? How are we meeting that actual demand on the city from the note payments that I'm showing? What makes this is to a certain degree, and I'm glad you looked at how kind of the flows work, because here's what's important, is we have to have some direction as to, or let's say we have to have a boundary as to what we think the revenues are gonna be without completely deferring everything out that ends up costing you more in interest by backloading significantly projects until we see something happen. So we had to, to a certain degree, is keep the payments at a level that will put a greater demand on your 2-penny sales tax if you don't grow. And that's why we've asked multiple times, I've asked staff, members of council, because we were approached with the concept that, or not the concept, with the reality that you could very easily grow by 2,400 to 2,700 homes in the next 10, 12 years. And I asked that question multiple times.
Right.
Is that real? Because it is a lot, but you have a lot of growth potential, and you have a lot of development potential. And so when we looked at this model, we looked at how does that fit? Now, understanding that the 10 million that we're looking at borrowing and the 10 million we borrowed 2 years ago, that these are to put you in a position to grow. And to be honest with you, not being the engineer standing up here, I really don't know how much of that we could carve back to actually assess a scenario where you drop off, but we don't put quite the size line in, because you almost have to go all out and say, build a line to sufficiently handle 2,700 homes.
And
Yes.
commercial growth. Yeah,
Yes.
let's not forget that, the commercial growth and that, so.
The other side of
Because
this,
I'm tired of not having growth here.
and yes, and be honest with you, 3 years ago when we met with seems like 3 years ago, I don't know, time flies by, we met with members of communities before the turnpike was built. we talked to the Department of Transportation, or the Turnpike Authority. And is this gonna happen? When's it gonna happen? And the first thing that I mentioned, I'll say it, whether it's positive or negative, it is here. And when we looked at where the actual turnpike landed, it landed in Harrah. It landed in, so from a commercial standpoint, knowing there's a lot of challenges,
Right.
but Harrah had the ability to actually have traffic that addressed retail, and any retail growth obviously turns around and makes everything I have in front of you more affordable. And I've only assumed after the next 2 years, 2% growth in your sales tax. If inflation's at 3%, you're gonna be at 3% growth in sales tax. That's the area that really needs to be monitored, because if we address lines at 29th Street, on 23rd Street, then that, and you put yourself in the best position to get development, then the numbers you see here will look grossly over-conservative, especially on sales tax. So,
And let me clarify a statement when I said I'm tired of not having growth here. That didn't mean all of Harrah. That meant 23rd Street, commercial on 23rd Street.
Yeah.
We've got growth going down there with all those homes and all those places, but I want the growth on 23rd as well. That's why the water and sewer there. So I just want to clarify that, because it may have sounded like I said, I don't want growth in Harrah, or I'm tired of not having growth in Harrah. No, we have a lot of growth in Harrah, but I want it on 23rd Street too.
A year ago, when I visited with John, when we stepped out and borrowed $2.5 million, at that time, he showed us that we could go ahead and borrow $10 million, and I was against it by all means. The problem that we've ran up against, so everybody knows, is Harrah Road sewer line is undersized. And so 5.3 million of this loan that we're looking at is strictly to upgrade Harrah Road sewer line to carry the houses that we've already pretty much committed to. Because we've committed to River Mist and Persimmon Valley. Those two additions, as they come online, we don't have the sewer line capacity to carry that. And now we got two other housing additions that are looking to come online, and definitely that would not carry those. So when we're looking at this, we're looking at actually doing it, not undersizing it for the future. We're looking at making it bigger for the future is what we're looking at. In 10 years, when all these are online, we probably have other problems, and the other problems are gonna be our wastewater treatment plants, probably gonna be close to maximum capacity at that time when all this is on.
We have more retail.
And hopefully we have more retail and sales taxes go up. But an equation that he hasn't brought in at this point is we've talked all about the sales tax and everything else, but our public works now, our water and sewer, is actually carrying a bunch of this on its own right now, if I'm not mistaken.
yes,
And we're not dipping into the 2% at this time.
right, other than paying the existing debt you have.
Yes, exactly. So
You're really not touching public works outside of that.
right, so our public works for the last couple of years have actually been carrying itself, maybe a little bit longer than that, but it's been carrying itself. But if you go back to 10 years ago, we was so behind the 8 ball on our water and sewer rates that we was actually digging into our general funds to pay the bills. So now finally our water and sewer is carrying their own. So the debt that we're looking at is not really over indebting the city any. It's over indebted, I won't say that, but it's not over indebted that we can't pay it, is what I'm saying. I mean, this is something that's doable and something, and really, if we're gonna do this loan and move forward, we need to go down, not only down Harrah Road, that is a necessity. We need to go down 23rd, and as well, when we go down 23rd, it upgrades the lift station back at the senior center, the pressured main, and all down behind the old town, that line upgrading it as well. So there's a lot of lines in there that are getting upgraded as well.
But it may be a commitment now, but like Bob said last time, when you put in the infrastructure and the utilities, it will always pay off.
And that's one inflation factor John did mention, absolutely true. If you build this thing now, instead of waiting to build it in leases, you save the inflation cost of building it at a higher price later. You can build it in today's dollars and save future inflation.
Right.
And
And you never catch up if you wait.
And that's so significant now. Never has it been a time that you, want to address getting things built at today's cost versus where they'll be 5 years from now.
What is the assumed growth rate that you're using in your calculations on the green column?
If you look up above in the yellow, you'll see a 5 and a 2%. There's a little yellow box up there. So,
Okay.
yeah, we assume for the next 2 years, 5%, which we've been way over 5. And then we just have it drop back down to 2. If, because of the math and compounding, if we kept that at 5, and it very well could be 5 minimum for the next 30 years, then that number you see, what you have available would grow dramatically. And that's what we want to be able to look at is, what is your trends going forward going to be? Because there's all types of, when you look at your sales tax collections, you have different types of vendors. And there's one particular vendor statewide that is generating revenues that was not here. That it just depends on which industry kind of continues to grow. And I think we're very conservative on that.
So you assume that the housing growth will increase or remain steady over like 250 homes per year. Did you not factor in a recession at any point to see how that would affect our ability to pay back this loan?
I will tell you, I was told 2,500 homes. I laid this out evenly, did not look at, where would this fall off? What would the ability?
Well, that's why
Because
that's why
you
I asked.
mentioned earlier that inflation, we would increase our sales tax 1%, 1 cent or 1%.
Right.
But also our cost goes up at the same rate or even higher rate.
Main thing is when you look at cost of living index and you look at when your inflation numbers come out from the Labor Department, what you have are a lot of different elements. You have elements that have to do, this is the toughest economy to try to figure out that we've seen in some time. So if you have material costs that are imports coming in from China that don't come in, you have global situations that you're dealing with. The actual cost of housing will obviously be critical. The cost of inflation as to who can afford homes. Once again, this is a model to assume that you will grow at some level. I guess the question, we've continued to have inflation, although many efforts by the Treasury to try to lower inflation, we still are at a position where until recently, the last couple months, we've had new housing purchasing kind of come back a little bit as far as building houses. I'm not here to talk about what's gonna happen as far as housing. It's a good question, and it's understandable, but these are just addressing what you have to do if you have to address infrastructure and assuming this level. This is a model. You could say, well, what if we just do 250 and we stop?
Yeah, that's why I asked that question earlier, can we still pay for it?
You can pay for it, but you're paying for it out of other sales tax. And if you say, if sales tax starts to inflate, I will tell you, if you say, what if everything goes south fast? Like whatever, like a mortgage. You go out and buy a house and everything goes south fast, you have to adjust. I don't know what's gonna happen with the economy going forward on this. And this is not, we're here on the side of showing you numbers that, I guess the question might be back to the city is, do we feel like there's any indications that the housing starts and the buildups will drop 10%, 20%, or just go completely stagnant?
The reason why I'm asking that, so we've got four housing additions down there that's dirt.
Right.
So we approve final plats for those additions. They come in and build 10 houses and the bottom falls out of the market and they stop.
Right.
We just invested $10 million into a sewer project large, or actually it's about 5 or 6 million, I think that one out there would be just to provide sewer. So all that, and that ceases, or it slows down, or whatever.
Right.
In the white column, you show that we are, that's what's 713, the first row, the 2024, the 713 is, after debt, that first year.
Right.
That doesn't take into any account the city operating expenses, does it?
No.
Okay.
Now, that's what's normal to fund everything else, capital needs wise.
So over here, and correct me, I may have misunderstood, but this percentages, what are percentages that you suggest that we move those monies towards the operations capital and general fund? Is that what you mean by that?
Well, pretty much, when you look at you look up above on the column 24, you see that if you had 250 homes, it's about $265,000 in additional revenue. What we have placed in here is that so much be allocated for operations, so much be allocated within the HBWA and also within the city, as far as other services. But that at the time when you are addressing infrastructure, that we suggested that you allocate 50%. Here's the key thing, as you change the 50%, obviously on the other page, you see it, that goes down. And we felt, at this time, because as you are building homes and as you're taking on, as you're taking the debt on to put in the infrastructure, and as the homes are coming in, as the homes are being built, until they're occupied and you have families in those homes, the assumption is you won't have the operational burden on you at that point in time. You won't have that until they're living in the homes and you're servicing them with public safety and you're addressing other types of needs. So that's why if you see there's the first 3 years, you see like 50% and then it goes to 40. Once again, this is a model for you to look at to see how things are trending and how you would actually adjust that as you move forward. What we didn't analyze, we're here to help you with doing a borrowing for water and sewer. But as you look at what are the additional costs that you take on, these allocated percentage could change, I wouldn't say significantly, but somewhat, to address as you see your population grow substantially, how do you address all of those particular additional citizens? And so you would allocate that differently. And hopefully I answered that
So,
question.
so you mentioned that our current sewer water pays for the current debt today.
Yes.
Is there a way that we can see with the added debt, how that will come up short?
But
It pays that debt.
It pays that debt right now.
Is there a way, and I don't know if he's the person to ask, but if we add $10 million to that debt, how do we come, where's the shortfall come up, and how long is that shortfall before our numbers?
Well, as long as we're adding these houses, we should stay up with the cost of the debt ratio, is what we should do.
Well, I'm just saying, I'd like to see that on just like this.
I don't know if we can do that or not. I can see. That's the rate.
Let's see if I can explain this to you. I want to make sure that I understand what has been discussed. And we can look at variables here that say, what if we don't have the growth in both housing and for the growth in sales tax, and look at a lesser number. We can certainly, if we're told, well, what happens if nothing grows in sales tax collections or in the growth of houses being added, then I will tell you right now, you can't take on $10 million without any growth. If growth stops, if you had 500 homes, then there's no point to do the lines in the first place. And the lines that were developed before address assume no growth. But once you do grow and you fall short, it's a matter of you, if you decide 2 years from now and you decide, okay, now we see that there's not been any particular housing shortage, then you may be paying, as Mr. Thompson stated, you may be paying 50% higher on the line costs. And so this is not an automatic if you don't grow. But all signs are that you have been growing, but that's up to you. I mean, we're just here to provide
But one of the problems that exists is we are already approving subdivisions that we can't accommodate if we don't do this, develop this line.
But we're also, I don't know, can I look at this like a new home buyer trying to buy a mortgage? And I'm looking at my job, wondering if I'm gonna have it 6 months from now or a year. Well, what if I lose my job? Can I pay for this note? I mean, we end up going into debt, betting on the come, like, we will keep that, we will be able to get the house, and we'll be able to afford it, you know? So do I do that for the city as well, in the same manner, looking to the future? Or do I think this whole place is gonna collapse? I don't think it's gonna collapse, but it could go down some, and we may not grow, but I'm not gonna get any growth on 23rd Street when I'm looking for commercial growth. I know everybody likes it down there, but I like it up here. So I want that too. So I'm not gonna get any growth if I don't have sewer and water up here.
Like John and I have both seen over the last 30 years, a much more difficult inflationary market. And the assumptions you're making now about projected growth are very conservative. And if anything, you're probably gonna have to step up and do more because you're gonna have more rapid growth. And these are not, I was sitting in a bank board meeting when the chairman of the board said, well, interest rates hit 17% today. It's not going any higher. Well, within a week, it was 21%. And so, but even in that crazy inflationary period, growth continued.
My first home in Harrah was 17% interest rate.
Yeah.
1983. 17% on my home.
This
And
is
we
a
still
great,
bought it.
this is a great opportunity for Harrah, and you'll not regret doing it. In fact, 20 years from now, people are gonna look back and say, you guys had foresight, and we're glad you did.
I don't think I have a need at all. I think we obviously realize what we have to do. My concern personally, and I'm just, to these numbers, is that we're going to be possibly down the road pulling money back out of the general fund to pay a note. Well, how's that gonna affect everything else? That's what I want to see. So,
Right now, we've obligated that 2 cents already, so obligating that, it has to be there.
Yeah.
So I mean, it ain't like we can sit back and say, hey, we obligated it, but we took it and used it for something else, so we can't do that. So I mean, so that money is there.
But we did say that 2 cent, the 2 cents would pay for this.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Without increased growth.
Without growth, yes, it will, but
then it will take money from other things.
yes.
That's right.
And one of the things you have to do is look at your
Police,
rate structure on
fire,
your utility rates.
wages, all that stuff. Just,
Remember that 4% increase every year.
The one thing we can do also is, and we talked about it, I mean, we could go across the board and we could up our utility rates. I don't think that's the answer, by no means. I don't think we up our utility rates. Other than we can, any new houses that are being built, we can put them in at a higher rate and they're paying for part of it. We can do it.
My utility rate already increased 4% every year, my trash and sewer.
Right.
Well, that's also a fallback position.
It increases 4% every year, and I didn't even notice it because it happens in the winter time. in January, and my bill's small.
But we can also charge an impact fee for all these new houses tying in that could help generate revenue. So there's other ways we can actually generate revenue on these projects without the 2%, without, you know,
So, can you make a different scenario with a little bit worse conditions on it? I mean, is that simple, or is that something I gotta pay you another? I'm just,
Well,
I mean, we always pay fees, I'm okay.
well, let's go a little bit beyond just this and kind
Okay.
of talk about the financing and what's involved in the timing. And because this is kind of how it all worked, like I said, we had to put something together to show, because the questions you're asking is what the Water Resources Board is gonna ask. They're gonna look at your ability to pay this. Now, I will tell you, the Water Resources Board will say, what's securing this debt? And you have sales tax and you have utility revenues. And you're gonna say, well, but if we don't grow, we stay stagnant, then there's less revenues to do other things. Just like a bank that lends you money, they don't care how much you have to suck it up in other areas when you actually have to make your house payment or your car payment. And so I'll be honest with you there, the board will look at this and say, you have the ability to pay this back, you have the ability to operate your systems, and looking at this structure, the 250 homes a year scenario is, as you can see, the dollars that are being accumulated is significantly, it puts you in a position to where you're looking at the dollars that you saw at the bottom of this particular page. Here's the timing on this transaction. Is right now, the Oklahoma Water Resources Board, they have meetings where they have multitude of borrowers from both cities and water and sewer districts that come to them to borrow from various programs. And this particular program is the Financial Assistance Division program. They sell bonds and they turn around and they loan you the money from the proceeds of the bonds. They are planning on now to have a bond sale in July based on other communities like yourself that are coming to them with applications in May, before June 1st, and they will consider those loans in July, and they will aggregate all of those entities that are coming to the program, and they will sell bonds in the last part of July. They meet July 18th, but they have to have applications from all these entities in hand by essentially Memorial Day. And so we would have to prepare an application as your financial advisor and submit the loan application in order to be on that July board meeting. And so as we look at, well, what's the importance of being on the July meeting? That's what Bob had just mentioned, is we're trying to get to market, because they're gonna sell bonds at the board level, AAA bonds, turn around and take those proceeds, loan those to you to do this project. We're trying to leverage everything we possibly can. And if we can hedge what interest rates are, we don't know how much the line's gonna cost, guaranteed, it's still a guesstimate. But if we lock in interest rates, you've locked in a major component of the cost of doing these projects. And so right now, there's discussions of there's obviously another meeting, or not so obvious to everyone, another open market committee meeting in May. So the Federal Reserve's gonna consider another Fed fund rate hike. And they have meetings throughout the year. And what we're trying to do is to bring you to the market as soon as possible before rates continue to jump up 1/4, 0.5%, 0.75%. So what we have in front of you tonight is just giving you the information so that if you move forward, we can, to a certain degree, leverage against or hedge against what interest rates would be going forward. And when you're borrowing 10 million, every 0.25% makes a difference. And that's why we're here in front of you tonight, is to actually provide all this information to you. So you
And to
can make
clarify a
solid
couple
decision.
things as well is, let's just say we agree to borrow the $10 million at this point, or to move forward to do that with the
Yeah.
resolution. And we get our Harrah Road project actually bid, and it's $7 million.
Right.
We don't have to take the whole 10 million if that's the case.
No, you would have to take the whole
We have
10
to take-
million
so
that you,
We have to, okay.
right, you would have to take the whole 10 million, and that's why as you identify the projects, you have to ensure that of those projects, that if you had 3 million left over, you have other projects that 3 million would go towards. And so,
And that's what happened on, they had Reno and 29th Street and this 23rd, and then when prices went extremely high, we couldn't do Reno, and we put all the money over on 29th Street.
Right.
That's what we did.
That makes it even scarier, because we have that much inflation, and the bid for Harrah Road comes in at $7 million.
I'm just throwing a number
We're
out.
done on
there.
23rd, and we just stay industrial looking for the rest of our lives, but, the other thing, Jeff makes a good point, River Mist is the only one building houses at this point. I mean, Ideal Homes will be done by 2023 probably. No, they got a second section in there, so there's like 70 homes in there, but, do we have any idea when Lincoln Landing's gonna start to build, Persimmon Valley's gonna start to build?
Persimmon Valley, they are putting pipe in at Lincoln Landing, they are doing that. They are doing the subdivision up here on Dobbs Road.
Right.
So that.
There's 17 homes there.
That's still.
Yeah,
Over on Dobbs Road, they're building there, they're building in Brush Creek right now, you know, so, back as, you know, Brush Creek, they're building up there right now, so, I mean, we do have houses being built right now at this time. River Mist will definitely, I feel like, start building here shortly, just because, hey, they got streets in, you know, they're not too far off on coming to us for that. We do
I
have,
think Harrah Point is.
Harrah Point, I think, is ready to go.
Those guys have been working.
Yeah.
They're ready to work.
So I think we're gonna grow. I mean, we can't sit back here and wait. I don't feel like, and then all of a sudden it's up on us, and now we have tons of sewer problems. I mean, luckily we haven't had any at this time. But we can't wait on that for sure. I mean, and by all means, I'm not just jumping up and down thinking this is a wonderful deal to go borrow $10 million.
No, I can be nervous about either way.
Yeah.
I'm nervous if you don't do it, and I'm nervous if you do it. I've got nervousness on both sides of it. But again, I would probably bet on growth. I would bet on the side of growth, on non-growth. You know, I've heard so much in this community about we're not growing, we're, you know, turning away people and all this kind of stuff. No, I'm trying to get growth, and, you know, that's what, I would like to see happen. I want it to be the right kind of growth, don't get me wrong. I want it to be the right kind of growth. But I want it. And I'm not gonna get there without this kind of stuff.
You recall the size of the 5.6 million down there road we put in?
It's 18 at the far end and 15, most of it, and then at the very end, I think it's 12, as far as size of the line is right.
So with, River Mist, Harrah Point, Persimmon Valley, Lincoln Landing all online, after we spend $5.6 million, what's our future growth capacity on that pipe?
And Steve was in on this as well on that meeting, but he said it will handle everything we put on it, including any commercial. Handle all the residential plus any commercial that we put on there.
Yeah.
And he said it will be oversized even at that time.
And it said that in 2021 when they annexed it across the street over from us. So, I'll believe it now.
There were that many different sizes, I thought we were going 18. I thought we were going 18 all the way.
It starts off at 18, then changes to 15, and then to 12.
And what's on 29th is 12?
There's no sewer on 29th whatsoever, it's all pressured main, it's an 8-inch pressured main, it's all this, so that you can't
We
even tie
put
into
it out
that.
for Persimmon Valley, yeah, so it's all pressurized, you can't tie
You
it.
can't tie into that. The only way you could tie into it is you'd have to do another lift station somewhere in the middle and do free flow somewhere along the way, that's the only way you could tie into that. But that's on the south side, which is in the county, and the water's on the north side.
And that pressured main comes up to our sewer plant.
That pressure main ends right about 29th Street across from Country Boy, there's a manhole there that it dumps into, and then it flows
Then it
down.
goes free
Then it
flow.
flows back to the south, to that
To the
lift
lift
station,
station.
and then it pumps it, yes.
But the question is, Persimmon Valley and any other growth that occurs on 29th, that, the pressured main you can't tie into, so it's just gonna service Persimmon Valley.
And
And
the-
the place on
Yes.
Luther Road.
Yes.
That's all it
that's all it
services.
serves, yes.
So I paid $10 million,
8 million.
8 million, I'm sorry.
8 million on that
8
one.
million on that for one housing addition and a bunch of industrial buildings that Doug.
And that was
Wilson
the old
looked at.
council that voted in, and
Well,
I'm the only one that
Yeah,
voted
I
against
get
it.
that, but it's still,
It's still,
I'm
yeah,
gonna say
that's all
it's
doing.
progress and we're building, and we may get some commercial out of it, so I wanna go forward with the progress on it, but it seems funny that I can never tie into that. So if there was ever another housing addition on 29th Street, I gotta put in a different sewer line, or I gotta put in this lift station to tie into. I need to learn about construction. Sewage construction.
But right now, on Harrah Road.
Yes.
And I'll go back, even what Jeff said, just not too long ago, I mean, supposedly we put in these variable speed pumps on the lift stations to control the flow that's down our line, and Bill said, oh, this will handle all of that subdivision, now he comes back and says, oh, we can do another 100 homes maybe, 150, you know, it won't carry 400 more homes, so this is something that, I mean, we don't have a choice on Harrah Road, and if we're moving forward for growth, I don't see why we don't do 23rd along the same time. I mean, that's where, that has hampered a lot of growth on 23rd all along, is because commercial companies aren't interested.
I am, no more businesses on 23rd.
So really, the choice is tonight is, how much do we go out and borrow? I mean, that's really, that's on a resolution, is, are we gonna borrow? I mean, John let us, if we say we wanna only do $5.3 million, and that's what he would go, but But the thing of it is, if we tell them we're borrowing $3 million, we don't have enough money to do all that. Here, and they did, and I forgot those papers at my shop, but, you know, if we did Harrah Road in phases, and the numbers I remember off my head, it was 2.5 million to do phase 1, that would get us 400 homes. It was another 1.6 million, if I remember correctly, to do another 500 homes. So we had 900 homes, and we're still short of everything, so that only gets us down the road maybe.
And you
3 or
have
4
price
years.
increases.
And then you have pipe, yeah, and then we got, still got the last bit of it to do it as well, so.
I don't want to piecemeal.
Then that's what I said, I want to, if we're gonna do Harrah Road, we need to do the whole thing. And we need to do it right.
And then this part that goes down 23rd and goes back behind the Old Town.
Yeah, that's, I like that. I went too far off on my number.
That goes behind Old Town and ties in, so the 23rd Street would go down there, go behind the,
Ace Hardware and back down along the railroad tracks, back to the, almost to park,
almost to the park.
almost to the park. And when Bill also did this, is he also, did a pretty good contingency on everything for cost or anything else. I mean, so Bill, when he did figure that out. If y'all want to see the numbers. these are the numbers for Harrah Road, is what they are, okay? It's, like I said, it's 5.3 and 2.5 was the first phase, second phase was 1.6, and the last phase was 1.1. That's round numbers.
And you don't know what year you would do those in.
Exactly, I mean, but I feel like if we do it, we need to design the whole, do the whole project, but you design the whole project. But if you looked at the way he laid that out, man, it's a cluster. I mean, this guy lays 400 or 500 feet of line and skips 1,000, lays 1,000 feet of line, I mean, you're piecemeal. And so I honestly believe if we do this, we've gotta do all of Harrah Road, no ifs, ands, or buts. I mean, that's my honest input on that, is we have to do all of that. And really, like, I mean, you know, you made a valid point, you go buy a house, you go buy a car, you got a job, I mean, you're gonna sit here and think, well, I'm not gonna do it because I may not have a job next week, I mean, I don't think they're gonna put me on.
We're all nervous about
Oh,
doing
it
that.
is nervous, I'm not disagreeing, I mean, I'm not, hey,
Well,
first
we
time I
usually-
met John, I let him know that I'm not happy about borrowing any money. I mean, I told him that, I mean, he knows, you know. The only good thing about it is that the interest rate is a pretty decent interest rate, is the only good thing about it, for what it is right now.
Right.
You know,
Again, I'm not opposing the need for the project. And I'm not opposing anything, I'm just concerned about the ability to pay that loan back in the event we go through a recession, which is it's on the more likely side than not likely side, with interest rates the way they are. If those houses slow down, where we're not putting on those many homes, then how's that affect our bottom line going forward with having to pay that note back? We're gonna take money from the fire department, police department, public works, I mean, that's my point. Can we not see that on some sort of spreadsheet before we make some kind of decision on whether or not we want to borrow $10 million from them? I mean, I'm just curious.
Michelle, you can't put, can you put that together by any chance? Tell
Well, yeah, I mean, we can anticipate, it's time to look at all kinds of scenarios. If we have, just wanna make sure, we wanna address that number, that, if you look at the excess of the sales tax column, it's the first black column that's on that sheet. And I know that, council member, that you addressed two things, which is, what if we have no growth in homes after a couple of years? We have kind of a housing shutdown, which, you know, there's discussions out
Which
there.
is probably not likely.
But it's tough to tell where we're gonna be. I'm surprised that interest rates aren't what they are, and housing prices going up 40% in the last 3 years. How in the world houses are still selling? But they are. But we're gonna slow down. The other part of this is, and you addressed this, is what if we don't grow by 2% a year? What if we lose businesses? Right now, the sales tax is sufficient, as you look at what's the excess of sales tax over, then you're looking at 34 million that you would take away from other capital needs of the city over a 30-year period, or about $1 million a year. And so, if you were to lose that type of sales tax, then you're obviously, you first have, how are you gonna address the debt payment? And you have the sufficient sales tax to make all those debt payments. If you grow by 2, after the next 2 years, and I could change this to 2 and 2. If you grow by 2% a year, I will tell you, if you don't grow by 2% on average for the next 30 years, that there's a lot more going on than that you should be concerned with, that you only grow by 2. But if you just grow by 2%, then you can fund all of the debt with sales tax, but it's going to cut into other types of capital needs of the city if you have you stop with no growth. But let's say you grow by 500 homes, because we could run scenarios. I have a spreadsheet, I could pull it up, we could have it here. We could look at multiple scenarios. If you stop growing after 500 homes, you've got 500,000 additional revenues. That's the one area too, as you grow and you get into year 2 and year 3, is, because if I'm you, as a council member, and I'm the water board, they're gonna say, well, what are you gonna do with that $500,000 that you now have an additional revenue because you've added 500 homes? What are you gonna do with those dollars? You've added homes since, you've added, I think like 300 homes in the last 3 years. What'd you do with that revenue? That's, if you're a citizen, you're saying, well, what happened to that? This is to basically take those dollars and set them aside, understanding that those dollars have to go towards the greater plan, which is, you can't look at this with blinders on. You have to look at the 2025, you got $500,000. Each year, you're relying on that increasing to a certain amount based on housing growth. You have to be very cautious, because you're gonna have governing body after governing body come in here over the next decade. And the people everything that's being asked tonight, unless you're all still here 10 years from now, we don't want forgotten. We don't want the questions from any one of you forgotten, that this is what you have to set aside. Simplistically, to say, well, what happens if we just don't grow at all? We can run those numbers, but I don't know which numbers you want to go with. If you want to, I can say no growth, stop building houses, and I'm not being sarcastic, you start tomorrow. But what we looked at is, you have a sales tax, and you've had growth in sales tax, but you haven't added, and please correct me on this, because this isn't something that we check with our communities, is I don't think you've had any major retail come in the last 5 years that have added. You haven't had the kind of retail that could bring in $500,000 in sales tax. You've grown to a certain degree, your existing base of retail customers. You have grown at that level. Doesn't mean you can't have a recession scenario where you have no one wanting to move into this community as far as retail. But as stated, if you don't have utilities on 23rd Street, that becomes even more of a mammoth challenge to get retail in to potentially come in and help you weather if you have other types of drop in general purchasing in Harrah or general purchasing nationwide. So I certainly can go back. I will tell you, if we come back and we look at different scenarios, we could certainly send out and run this any way you want to run this. And but I want to at least, address the timetable, that if we look at this, if we don't do anything tonight, you have, when's your next regular meeting? Okay, May 4th. Then we can address it at that meeting, and we could be retained at that meeting, and you guys can authorize the moving forward of this at that meeting. We still have time to get the application prepared, but it'll be tight. But we're here for you. We're invited.
Correct, John, if they adopt these resolutions tonight, which authorize you to make the application, and something drastic changes in mind between now and July, they don't have to take them on. It's just been approved.
You've only approved it, and what you've also, here's a key, 2 or 3 pieces. This is key. You're authorizing up to $10 million. We're gonna submit an application, and we're gonna show how you're gonna be able to pay back $10 million. Within a reasonable amount of time, you can come back to us and say, you know what? We looked at this and we looked at this. We're gonna submit up to $10 million, but because you have all the different pieces of this that are tied to doing a $10 million loan, we would have to, by May 15th, know, we could authorize this, we'll submit the application. We could, you say, start out doing 10, but we may draw it back to 7.5, or back to 5. As long as you let us know by the middle of May, it's because they're gonna start looking at finalizing everything at the board as we get to the last half of May. Then we would reduce everything and that's what would go to the board. Once you go to the board, and it's basically, once they say, we're gonna put you on the July board, and that's gonna be around June 20th, then you could say, pull it off, but then once they approve it on July 18th, it's at that amount, it's at that board order amount. And so, you certainly have time, you certainly have 2-3 more weeks to kind of look through this and study this. This is the first time you've seen this for everyone to see this.
When does the interest get locked in?
The interest rate actually gets locked in when they sell the bonds, and that won't happen until, probably around the last few days of July when they sell the bonds. And part of all of this, because it's all just a model, 3 weeks from now, we'll tell you where rates are. We'll tell you how much, we'll rerun this, we can send it out, and we'll say, this is what the picture looks like today. But, you know, once we get to a point to where we're very close to the meeting time, like I said, mid-June, we really need to have everything locked in, for sure.
It would tie from the turnpike pretty much all the way to someone can close that gap. Close it there.
The thing is, all the growth, every business sitting out there needs that growth. And we want that growth, you know, Josh is gonna want it, Greg's gonna want that stuff coming in. That puts people in your store as well, you know. I have a hard time believing we won't have any growth, and I know Jeff does too. It's just hard to take, the money out. This is the 23rd one, right?
They need the growth. That's great.
Oh, but,
Well, we have an obligation of the city and debt that we're, it's something, you know, we're taking money from the fire and police and our general fund to pay our loans. Maybe we could have, I don't know. I just wanna make sure, that's all I'm asking. is to have the numbers.
They go 2 to 3 weeks. All you can say is,
Well, if we're pushing to get in on the loan on July, and Bob said, if we approve the resolution, that gives him the permission to move forward. And then have him come back on May 4th and present a no growth scenario. And at that point is, I mean, he would be progressed forward, but we could change the number at that time. Because I really don't think we have a choice on Harrah. I don't think we have a choice. I mean, if everybody says, no, we don't wanna do this, I don't think we have a choice. I mean, it's gonna come down to one point or another, that when they start building a couple hundred homes down there, and our sewer line ain't working, everybody out here that's tied into it's gonna be mad as heck at us. You know, I mean, it's gonna be a major deal.
if you only do Harrah Road, I'm gonna be madder than that, because there ain't nothing up here except industrial looking stuff.
So if we,
But, I mean, if that's the case, I guess I could always just move.
It really does require you all to have faith in the community. And the history of Harrah would tell you that faith is justified.
I have all the faith in the world, but on my personal finances, I always make sure, before I go buy a brand new car, whether I can afford it,
Yep.
paying my electric bill, paying everything else before I
But
do.
your personal history would tell you you can't.
Well, that's why I'm
That's
talking
why-
about a
that's why-
mortgage, people, you still do it, you look at it, you have to figure it out.
Harrah has never once regretted a capital investment. That includes this building you're sitting in and senior citizens center behind you.
we've always paid all of our debts. And everything said status quo. I mean, few homes here, I mean, adding homes, stuff, but sales tax, we're still good, we can still pay. Based on, because we've got the sales tax, you know, yes.
You can do
We
it.
may not do as many roads or something like that, we may have to change what we do.
Larry, if you do go forward with the motion, I know you're doing them both together. first we need the motion on the city side, and then the motion on the public court side. Is it those ayes and nays, and who made the motion, all goes into the resolution.
Approve it again to May 15th to decide if we want to adjust it
Want to
based
adjust
up, down, based on information. Could you come back on May 4th and?
Yeah.
So what would y'all like to do tonight? I feel like we need to take a step forward regardless of what we do. We still have till the 15th to change whatever. Or the dollar amount or whatever. That Harrah Road, so we're gonna have them start working on it, we might as well start working on the whole thing. Yeah, we may come back and say, okay, on Harrah Road, we may cut it down to just phase 1 and 2, so we may not have that.
Or just Harrah Road.
Well, it's true.
You gotta, what we're
Well, eventually
saying
gonna
is,
have to.
with the houses down there, there's no houses up here, so, so,
This is for future, hopefully, we can get lure something in.
got that, but you have to do the Harrah Road because the houses that are potentially there. So, yeah, you can start the 10 million and cut it back, but you still need to do all of Harrah Road.
You also really need to get this up to the turnpike, because you're not gonna acquire the big box retail, the sales tax retail you want on the turnpike unless you've already prepared for it.
Don't get nothing. Put something down 23rd Street.
So we make a motion, we need to approve two different, one for the public works and one for the city of Harrah.
Your city here first, man.
And city of Harrah. Do I have a motion? Let me go ahead and close item A on both of these and go to item B on the city of Harrah. And consider and take action on resolution 2023-0420 CC for the city of Harrah to approve the action of the Harrah Public Works Authority authorizing issuance of sale and delivery of the promissory note to the authority of Oklahoma Water Resource Board. We have a motion to move forward. So we don't take action.
Do we have till the 15th?
We have till the 15th
to change.
to change what we're borrowing and all that. This is just starting the application is all this is doing. John said he'd come back on the 4th and,
Okay.
and submit everything at that time.
And I'll make that motion.
This is on the city side.
I'm sure that motion says application.
That's all this does, is authorize the application to be made.
Well, what he read says authorizing issuance, sale, and delivery of promissory note
Let me address that.
with authority to the Oklahoma Water Resources.
That's what the resolution is, but the documents to approve the loan comes at a later vote, yeah.
Well, you're actually authorizing, this is all in one. Understand, if you read, authorizing indebtedness up to 10 million, you can come back and say, we want to borrow $10. Then that's resolution in front of you, you can borrow $10. And what we've done here is because of timing, is to have, you authorize up to 10 million, you can have us back on May the 4th and say we want to, and you can make it in your motion. I want to make sure everyone's comfortable. You can make in your motion that you are actually authorizing the application and up to $10 million and come back to determine final number, whatever you want to do. We had all this as one resolution because of timing and not to have to come back. Now that we're coming back on May 4th, this resolution is both submitting the application, engaging us, and authorizing the application for us to submit that, to prepare and submit that for you. So it's basically three different parts of that resolution. And I'll defer to Bob. I don't think we can carve out pieces of this resolution where we're only doing the authorization of the application, but we're not authorizing the loan yet until we figure out what we want to do on the loan. We don't want to authorize hiring anybody yet. You would have to engage us because we're gonna start preparing the application.
And the key to this is the language up to 10 million.
It's up to,
You're reserving with that resolution the right to change that number on May
Right.
4th.
and we're not gonna submit anything to the board before May the 4th. We're not gonna, until you give us direction on that, we're putting all the background information together.
Do you have access to our operating costs on a monthly basis or yearly basis?
Do I have access to your monthly? I have access, yeah, I have access
I mean,
to.
so you could put that in a column, again, to show us the shortfall or the plus based upon your 2% growth. That, the excess part.
Right, I wanna make sure where everybody understands on this, because you may, I'm not sure we're talking to everyone on this. We first start out with the 2 penny sales tax, that's how this is gonna be paid for. We never looked for it to be paid by utility revenues on this new debt. The additional homes are a windfall. The sales tax was gonna pay for all of this. And so you say, well, what if the sales tax goes south? If the sales tax went south, then you have less and less that you have for other capital needs of the city. Not salaries, you would have less for public safety vehicles, or vehicles for public works, or other types of water and sewer lines. You'd have less for that. You would, as far as the numbers that I showed in the actual black column, that's what's actually left, just without, you get no revenues from all your growth. That shows you your actual amount each and every year growing at 2% after the next 2 years. But the question is also was brought up is, what if we don't grow by 2%? How does that hurt us? What if we actually fall by 5%? What if we lose half of our businesses? There are a lot of, and I'm not being sarcastic. What I'm saying is, there's a lot of things that could happen that sales tax could drop dramatically if you went into a disastrous situation. But as I stated earlier, you have other problems to worry about if that drops dramatically. But what we wanted to do is to see, can you even afford this with just sales tax alone at a 2% growth? And the housing, and I say it's a windfall not that you don't need it. It's a windfall in that those dollars can then help support all of the operating costs of the city that are beyond just water and sewer operating costs. You support other departments of the general fund. And so I want to make sure everybody's clear on that. This is not if we don't have any other housing added beginning today, you can fund this with your sales tax, assuming 2% growth. I can go back and say, what if you don't grow at all for the next 30 years? And show you what that picture is. But you have other problems if you don't grow it. The sales tax is, you've lost business because inflation typically is going to be 2 to 5%. And it's going to be reflected. So, I work for you guys. I'm not promoting anything here, but you're asking the right questions. But I want to make sure everybody understands sales tax, 2 pennies. Now, everybody else would have to give up capital needs if you had no further growth in housing. And by showing 250, that's just me laying numbers out there. We could change those numbers and say, what if you just grew by a couple of hundred and it just fell off? What does that look like?
Not growing at all is not gonna happen. I mean, and as John just mentioned, I mean, big box store. What big box store do we have in Harrah? Harps, is that our largest store that we have probably? So the thing of it is, if we lost 1 or 2 of our other stores, we sure don't want to. But Brahms is getting ready to build, that should add more revenue when Brahms build. O'Reilly's getting ready to build, that should add more revenue as well. So we do have things that are coming in growth and coming to the city as well.
We've had growth even on the downside.
We have, and so I mean, we can't sit
You're
here,
gonna grow in spite of yourself.
we can't just sit here and say, let's not do anything. You know? So, do you wanna
Got a motion, you set?
have a motion? Steve, do I have a second? I'll second.
Scalzo,
Yes.
Rudick.
Yes.
Stankowski,
Yes.
Brzezowski,
Yes.
Trent,
Yes.
motion carried.
Okay, go to the public works, so item B is, now this one actually has a policy in it. Consider action of resolution 2023-042 Harrah, of the Harrah Public Works. To authorize the loan of the Oklahoma Water Resource Board a promissory note not to exceed 10 million. So not to exceed 10 million, we can come back on before the 15th, which would be on the 4th. And we can change that amount to any amount that we want to at that time. It's just, agreeing to start moving forward, because I think we're all in agreement that, regardless of what we do, we gotta do Harrah Road. And so, if we came back on the 4th and said, look, we're not doing nothing on 23rd, we just need 5.3 million, and that's all we do. And he can maybe get us another number, he can cover us.
Yes, I will give you whatever you need.
So, have that on the 4th, and so, do we have a motion to, do we have a second?
Scalzo,
Yes.
Rudick.
Yes.
Stankowski,
Yes.
Brzezowski, Trent.
Yes.
Motion. And then you wanna make that special time again with John County?
Yes, let's do that again at 5. Does that work for you?
Yeah.
On
Make
May 4th, 5 o'clock, does that work? Let's get it.
I'll send out an email with the names, plug in the blanks in the resolution.
Okay. Thank you.
John, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's take a 10-minute recess, let everybody stretch your legs, get a drink or whatever they need to do, so let's just take about a 10-minute recess and we'll reconvene here. We'll get stretch the legs. Yes, I am too. You ready, Cindy? Back here. You ready? We're gonna call the meeting back to order. Jump over to, item C, discussion and possible action to revisit the offer to lease the alley lot that presents the Saturday on bars.
Going to the consent agenda.
Oh, yes, we can, I can jump back up there.
You
Hold
didn't
on.
go far enough.
I didn't go far enough, I got bit, actually, do I have a motion to approve the consent agendas, or does anybody want anything taken off of that? And I do, and I think it's number 3. Yeah, it's actually, Manic Drive is actually 21, it's 2. I want to take number 2 off. 382. 382, I want to remove it this time. The rest of it, I mean, it looks like, looks like Marty will be acting city manager in Levi's absence. Levi's gonna be gone a couple of days, looks like on a Friday and Monday and over the weekend, and Marty will be acting. So, anyway, we have a motion to approve the consent agenda, removing item 382.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda, removing item 382.
I'll second it.
Scalzo,
Yes.
Rosowski.
Yes.
Pankowski.
Yes.
Hurst. Rudick.
Yes.
Trent.
Yes. The reason I moved item 2 on this PO is I'm not satisfied. And I think Steve knows, and I think I've filled in some other people. What happened is Manic Drive, when they overlaid Manic Drive, which has 3 houses on that road, the Assembly of God Church and our Public Works. And Steve called me one day and he was dissatisfied with it. And he was dissatisfied with the way they ended in everybody's driveway and everything else. And I hadn't had a chance to look at it at that time, but I went up there that afternoon and looked at it. And I called Steve back and I said, you know, it's not that bothers me, it's 16 feet wide that bothers me. There's a narrow road. And I don't know what we can do about it. Bob may can give us some better ideas on this, but the road was 20 feet wide pretty much, other than maybe one area around the curve. And, you know, we've gone in and covered it up, and he mentioned that, oh, that was gravel there that packed in, looks like asphalt, and it wasn't. I mean, it was asphalt. That road was 20 feet wide most of the way, with the exception of maybe around the curve. And, we could probably go to some old satellite pictures if we needed to and actually get a closer view of that. And it was bid, and so he came back and he bid the job at $58,866. Me and Steve argued the point. We couldn't get the city manager to come up there at that time, and so me and Steve argued the point with TJ Campbell, and they came back for, he mentioned $2,000 is what he mentioned, and then he charges $2,963 more because he told me he ate 40 ton. I haven't seen it. I'm just disappointed in what we got, because I asked him today when I visited with Jordan from TJ Campbell, I said, why didn't we just do Tim Holt 19 feet wide if that was the case to save the extra quantities? You said you was doing it to come in on quantities. I said, when we had to bid the job, we literally wanted to bid from edge of road to edge of road. You did all the other roads, why did we not do this one? And he said, well, that's just what he saw out there with 16 feet wide roads. I disagree. And so now we're at a point that we need to see what our options are.
One of the things that day, and I realize it's verbal, is when we asked them to do the extra and put that shoulder like at the turn there, getting on, because as the Harrah Public Works trucks come in or anybody else, the person leaving that street had to stop, the Harrah trucks would have to stop, wait till that one goes out, because the road's so narrow. And you can see it needed to be a lot wider at the stop sign. But he said that he'd pick up half of it, half that cost, and yet now there's 2,963 on there, even though by his word, he said he'd pick up half of it. So did he not put so many tons of asphalt in there, and that's how we picked up half, but it definitely wasn't $6,000 more to do it. He thought it would only be $2,000,
Exactly,
and that he'd go like half and half with the city.
exactly. And if y'all go look at that road, if you drive up Manic, I mean, they did a great job, I mean, really on Holden, on Tim Holt. And then we can go to Manic Drive, and it's off the beaten path, it has 3 houses, and like I said, not any traffic to speak of. But we got a piece on it, we pieced in 3 foot on one side up at the front, and it's pieced together, it's not done the way it should have been done, it's not overlaid the way it should have been done, I mean.
And the part he pieced in there is not as thick as the original part.
And none of us, when we agreed to have Campbell do this, not one of us thought that he was gonna do anything less than overlaying the whole road. Because if any of us would have thought differently, it would have been more clarification on it. And so, what's our choices, Bob?
But I need to look at your bid documents before we give you an opinion.
Right here, the bid document. It's right there. It's a bid document, and I have actually a signed copy, maybe with that.
Well, according to this, he had an obligation to put 3 inches over the entire Manning Street. So if the street was wider than what he laid it, he didn't fulfill his bid requirement. And so you can withhold payment until it's corrected.
Okay. Did you hear that, Steve?
Yes, sir.
Because his bid gave him an obligation to put 3 inches on the entire street.
But he's gonna come back if he does it, and he's gonna say, well, I only bid 350 ton, and now to 80 ton more.
He also says 3 inches. That's up to him to figure out how many tons it takes and how wide the street is.
Yeah, and that's one of my problems when you,
Number 6.
if we have this contract, 6 puzzles me. If I do a contract, I have somebody doing a contract and, well, we talked about a driveway, you know, when I had the driveway redone, here's the price, $7,000, you're gonna have this driveway and these sidewalks. I don't expect to have an increase in price, and I said it had to be a certain width. I don't expect to have an increase in price when he's done, and say, well, it took me more yards of concrete to do this than what I originally told you. Well, I'm not paying for it. And oh, by the way, if you didn't make it to 18 foot wide and only made it 16 foot wide, which was the differences that I wanted, because I have a wheelchair, I wanted a wider driveway. So, if you only did 16, I'm sorry, you're gonna tear it out, you're gonna make it 18 feet wide for the same price. And this guy needs to do it for the same price, if you ask me. I agree.
And is it Manning Street?
That's man.
I mean, it's a little bit longer than
He's already
Holden,
piecemeal.
I mean,
Yeah.
than Holden.
It's a fairly long street, it goes up there to Public Works, and
Yeah, I drove it, and so when you look at,
Holden's not that long of a street.
yeah, compared to,
This was,
but when you look at what he did on Tim Holt, the tons there, 350 versus
Tim Holt,
355,
Tim Holt is 2 inches.
yeah.
So that makes a little bit of a difference. We tried to bridge some of that, so that was a little bit of a difference in doing that. So.
Okay.
So do we want just at this time? Like Bob said, we don't have to pay it right now. You want to just table it till the next meeting and let him know that we're not satisfied, and it does, you know, but I do know.
so wait a minute, what's our process? If we've already talked to him and he disagrees, then what do we do? He disagrees.
He disagrees.
He thinks it wasn't wider. He thinks it covered the whole street.
He thinks he did, he, as far as that, but we showed him some areas, he said, oh, that, we didn't count that, and I said, what do you mean you didn't count it? It's part of the road, you know, I mean, and I mean, now Jerry's gone up there and he's covered up a bunch of stuff already because he's made it so people can get in and out of his road, but up there by their building, I mean, there was 3 foot on the south side, no doubt, is that right, Jerry? Pretty close. I mean, that, he probably only did about half of it probably 19 feet wide. We're still not 20 foot wide, because we didn't do the north side of any of it, then, you know.
Yeah, when they first did it, you could drive down, and the biggest complainer, the guy that's complained the most about that street being messed up, you could see on his side, it was just way off, and a big drop off. They just drop it off, don't blend it in or whatever.
But his opinion of this, and he's charging, he agreed to 350 ton at $160 a ton, $56,000. Now he came back and said, okay, we did another 40 ton there, is what he told me. And if you remember that day, Steve, when we was there, he said, we didn't go over any on this street. One ton or something.
Right.
Yeah, this street we hit right on the money.
Right on the money.
Right on the money. And so, he did mention that. Now he told me he went back and he's done 40 extra ton, and he only charged us for 18.52 more ton. And so, his opinion is he can charge us for the tonnage, too.
If he did
The way I
that,
read his bid is the only measurement that the city can go by is it's gonna be 3 inches thick, and it's gonna cover the street. It's up to him to calculate the tonnage it's gonna take to accomplish that. We'd have no way to calculate that.
So do we have, you said aerial photos you can get?
Well, we should be able to, we should be able to go back to satellite photos and get that. I mean, just off the internet.
Was measuring it would be another issue.
Well, good work, has some tools that, man, you can,
Okay.
you can measure almost anything with it, seriously, you know? And then honestly, even if we don't do that, we can go up there, seriously, and Jerry, we can go up there and uncover the road on each side. I mean, we can spot and uncover it and show exactly where the road is. That's
You
not,
really should do it for the price of the bid.
that's what I said. So, he disagrees with that, and I've
Now,
been.
one thing you could do is approve paying him the base bid and submit that to him, and just put on his final payment. And then, if he wants to make an issue about the additional, that's for a different day.
But even if we paid the base bid, he didn't overlay the road the whole way anyway.
How much, he went back and did it.
Well, he pieced it in.
Yeah.
It's not done, and he
Not done
didn't,
what you
and he
want.
didn't do the whole thing either, he just did the bottom. So, he didn't do it all.
Yeah, that's one way to compromise, I guess, if we're paying for the base bid, we're not paying you any extra.
Did he turn in tickets to you by any chance? No tickets?
No, remember, Michelle, did we get,
No
invoices?
tickets.
For,
Yes, I have.
TJ Campbell?
The invoices were attached.
Yeah, I got the invoices, but did he actually give load tickets for every load?
I have the low ticket,
You have the load tickets. Did you ever total up the load tickets on Manny, or any of those? Or Tim, you haven't totaled any of them up? Could we do that? Could we total up all those and just see if the tonnage is right? Okay.
you're saying on Manic he went 40, he's saying he went 40 over the 350?
That's what he said, pardon me, on the phone today, yes.
Right.
And he
he's
said
only
he-
charging us for 18?
Yes. So he said he went another, that day when we went there, he was one ton.
Right on.
Right on.
He's got 351 tons.
That's exactly what he said, and now, he's only charging us for 17 more ton, because, and he's eating out of the 17, so he's eating,
And that's where
23
he's
ton.
getting that he's eating.
Yes, that's where his cost is,
This was our half, and then
yes.
calculate his half.
Well, he's calculating his out at the same price, you know,
Right.
160, you know, and I'm just not, I'm not satisfied with the job that we got. Bob recommended we pay the base bid and see what happens. I mean,
That's kind of a compromise. And you could refuse to pay any of it if you get the job the way it should have been done. But it kind of puts the burden on him if you pay the base bid and say, you didn't do it right, but we paid you in full anyway. claiming he needs more money, which we don't
Yes,
agree.
he would come back and say he needs more money.
In our interest, I don't think.
So with the exception of the splice, everything else is up to par?
He really did a good job on all the roads, really, I mean, and even Manic, he did a great job at 16 feet wide. It's where he pieced it all back in, is really just not a great job.
And although he said the part was the width, I couldn't stand that people had to drive out of their driveway and hit a bump of asphalt as they came up out of their driveway. But, I just figured that was normal,
But we got all that fixed with, Jerry came in and fixed all
Yeah.
that. I mean, the road looks, I mean,
Good service.
yeah, I mean, I don't think Jerry's griping about it. It's a whole lot better than dodging potholes. It's a 5-minute drive to get to the back of the street dodging potholes. so.
So do you really, if we're not gonna try to make him do anything else, well, you could make, you pay him the base, and they say, if you want your other $3,000, you come and fix this thing the way it is.
Yeah, be a good compromise.
Do you think that's really gonna happen, or should we clear it up? Do you just pay the base bid, or do you pay the extra $2,900 and be clear?
That's up to y'all. I just wanted to bring everybody's attention to what we're doing, what's going on, because I mean, what would you do if it's your own personal
You
road?
get the base bid. That's what it is. And if he wants, and he needs to fix the road as well.
And it's piecemeal. It's piecemeal.
Or to fix it though, is he gonna have to strip it?
Oh,
No, they did go back and.
Or what's he need
long
to
as,
fix?
long as it's a hot day.
Or what's he need to fix?
Asphalt's
Well,
heated
have you not
up.
drove down it?
No.
It's where he added a 3 foot on it, the joint, the cold seam that's there, and then it kind of slopes off a little quicker, it's not level with the other road. It kind of
So what's he
slopes
gonna do to fix it?
off. He's done in his opinion,
What would he have to do to fix it?
probably overlay the road another inch, about 3 feet, and he ain't doing that.
Again,
Is the asphalt gonna stay on the 3 foot he overlaid?
I mean,
depends on the size of trucks. that
depend
go
on,
down there.
I mean, trash trucks drive right on the edge over there, that's what it does. Could you keep your trucks over on the
Yeah,
north
I'll try to
side?
make in the
Just
middle,
making
right?
sure we keep it in the middle. So, I mean, we just need to make a decision on what we're gonna do, if we're gonna fight a battle with him, or if we're gonna pay him going down the road, if we're gonna pay him base bid and say, look, the road wasn't overlaid like it to begin with, and that's what I think do base bid and fight the battle, and then on.
Talking about $2,900.
Right, like the battle doesn't go. Do we have a motion? We want to- The base bid was 58,866.66.
I can make a motion, I will make a motion to pay PO or TJ Campbell PO number 23021, the original of the base bid. Yeah.
Do I have a second?
One second.
Scalzo,
Yes.
Kozowski, Pankowski,
Yes.
Riddick,
Yes.
Trent,
Yes.
motion carried.
Okay, now we're gonna jump down. We're good to go to item C now, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Discussion of possible action to revisit the offer to lease the alley lot that presently houses the Saturday bar area.
I guess I'll speak on behalf.
This, let me just ask a question. Is it really a Saturday bar?
That's what.
Every Saturday we open it up?
No, that's what the Friends of the Park named it when the city and they upgraded it.
Yeah.
Changes to, and they were having Saturdays on Main
Okay.
events.
I thought it
So
was
it's
special.
Saturday bar.
Yeah, I thought it was special events.
Not every Saturday.
Not every Saturday.
No intent of that. Our thing is, we just want on a basic level, want to know if the city is interested or willing to consider leasing that alley, it's technically an alley that the city manages, leasing it to us. Our intent is basically, largely it will continue to be used, it has been used by the Friends of the Park and then us with the Nats as well. Of course, if we're leasing it, we will maintain it and upkeep it. Our intent would be to bring electricity in there, which there is no electricity, which would assist certainly with the Nats, not having to bring the electric hubs in for every event and that sort of thing. So it takes out of your all's hands the need to upkeep it. Our intent too would be to allow for other permitted events that it would be available for, not just only us being able to use it type thing on it as well. And again, properly permitted and insured events, much like ours have to be. That's the initial concept. I mean, are y'all willing?
What's the real benefit for you to lease it from us? What changes that makes it really that more lucrative for you guys to lease it than for us to have it?
It gets taken care of.
Meaning,
I'm not trying to
because,
be-
oh, you don't have to be. I went and took a couple pictures of it. I do it every week and take
Yeah.
pictures of it. It's trashy.
Yeah.
But it's not just the weeds, it's the school chairs that just sit all around in there that
Cleaned
aren't picked
as-
up
Has been cleaned up as of today.
as of today.
Yes.
Yeah, all I'm saying
But
is,
again, it is city property.
right, but the chairs, who do they belong
I'm
to?
not positive.
Okay.
They were brought
So
in for an event.
whoever brought those in, my take would have been, they should have just cleaned those chairs up. The weeds, that's on us.
And I don't
get
know
it.
who brought the chair, I mean, it might have been one of us,
Yeah.
but
The broken up, school that's sitting down in the ditch down there,
okay,
is that the city's to clean out?
it's the city's property.
It is the city's property, but the people that were having the event there, how did that thing get broke up and thrown in the ditch?
I don't even know when it, I
And
don't know when it happened, to be honest with you, Steve. It could have happened at an event, it could have happened, just as an FYI. I went around the back today, the door had been kicked in, who knows when that had been done.
Yeah,
So,
and-
and same thing with the school, who knows when.
You're right, there could be kids running through there and jumping on them. and-
And I took it upon myself to put a new lock and latch on that door.
Yeah,
So we're trying to help.
yeah, so the advantage to you is that, it seems a little strange to me, is that you would clean it up.
Well, for utilization and events, it'll look better, and it'll,
Right.
put electricity on it, takes away having to bring hubs and stuff like that,
And
gives
then,
us better access to service it.
and between events, it would be clean as well.
Yes,
Yeah, because it's yours.
it's our property,
Leased
at
to
that
you.
time leased to upkeep mowing and other stuff.
And just one more question, why can't we get electricity to it? And I think you might have explained this before, Josh, at one, why can't we get electricity to it, but you guys will be able to get electricity to it?
No, you can, nobody ever has, because you've got electricity available across the road, and you've got hubs, so you've been running cords across the road, bringing that big hub for everybody, so you got the cord to deal with.
Is there a big cost, Jerry, to put that, put electricity?
Put a meter
across
in?
the street?
I don't know here, I just put a meter in at the lake, it's $2,800.
You're probably looking at $1,200, $1,500.
And you guys are willing to do that?
Well, there's several issues that I have overall. I mean, number one is we do have the neighbor living right next door to it. But besides that, just, the Oklahoma statute, Title 37, Section 8 says that no person shall be drunk or intoxicated in any public road or private, streetcar, public place, building, or public gathering. That's an Oklahoma statute. We go to our own ordinances, and we're breaking our own ordinances. We jump back here, and it says, consumption prohibited where? No person shall drink, consume in any manner alcoholic beverages on premises, retail alcoholic beverage store, nor in any public place. Neither shall they break the seal of the package and sold. That's section 3:110, and you continue on back, and farther back, it also says that you cannot have a location for a retail package store, mixed beverage, except, or bottle club in a specific area that's within 300 foot. There is a church within 300 foot of that area alone, and that's that church that's still active on the other thing. So that becomes another issue on that behalf. So just through some of these bills, no persons within city limits shall be intoxicating liquor in any public place. There's another one in here that said something about alleyways. And that is an alleyway, so that falls in that same category, and I can dig that up here in a second. So I think if whatever we do, really the bar, right here, drinking in public, it's unlawful for any person, whether minor age, to drink any low point beer while in such place upon any public street, alley, or any public highway, in public building or other public places within the city, and shall provide. That's section 3.213, drinking in public.
I don't have sections, but when you apply for the special permit from the Able Commission, that's where it allows you to have the special event and have, I mean, that's
But
for
this
that
is-
part. Now, for every other time you're talking, yes, you're exactly right. But when the special permitting comes in with the Able, they're in charge of that, and they say, okay, for this day, this certain time, this is allowed.
Right.
And I think, I would also point out, I mean, when was that, you're looking at the city ordinances, right?
Yeah, I'm looking at city.
When were those written?
Some of them was back in 18, is what, probably gonna talk about most of them.
Most of them are older than that. I've looked at them too.
I mean, they're on here.
And the state has changed those laws, the city has not.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's where I'm saying,
Let me just ask a question.
One of them's
about this.
1986, I mean, I'm
that's what I
not.
saw too.
Let me ask you a question, a guy that arrested my grandson this morning, this afternoon. Hey, I remember talking during the St. Patrick's Day event about somebody that came walking up with beer
Yes, sir.
into the event. It wasn't purchased in the event, they just came walking up drinking beer. Wasn't in plastic cups or anything like that. I think the conversation went such with, the city manager and you and somebody else, that people can actually walk down the street drinking a beer. Not in our city, but I mean, in the state of Oklahoma, there's not a law against it.
There is.
Oh, there is a law
There is,
against it.
and the way they get around that, whether it's Norman, Stillwater, or some of the other campuses, one, they get a special permit from Able that
Right.
allows them to do that, but that still does not, supersede our city ordinances. So the special permitting process that we put in place would take the place of it kind of mirrors the Able Commission's special permit process. And then that special permit that they apply for goes in front of whatever the board's gonna be, because remember, that was still in a test phase, and they will approve it or not. And when they approve that, then you're basically saying that for this limited amount of time, there's times if I'm wrong, correct me, then you're allowing them to consume alcohol or whatever it is that they've asked for within that confined space. So when the people walked up, one, they brought alcohol from outside into the confined space, which they can't do. And two, once they got there, it wasn't purchased by that special permit. So they had done a lot of different things wrong besides driving up with some kids.
Right. And I understand what the ordinances say. And I understand there's people that dislike it. I always ask, I wanna ask, I looked through the Sweeney Switch thing on the development and doing all that stuff, and it's a nice book, but there's 80 houses within a quarter of a mile there, I don't know that we ask every house. I know we ask the ones that live right on the street, but every house if they enjoy those events. I know most people enjoy those events, except for the ones that live right around it, okay? And I'm not against, we put the special permitting process in place. And so if you get that special permit, and you get the Able Commission, there's no issue, I can't complain. Is that right?
I think that's right.
I can't really say anything against it. I
As long as
mean,
they got the permit.
yeah, I've read the ordinances, but But if they've got the permit, they can do it.
So they can do it every weekend.
If
If they
they
get-
they've gone through the special permitting process, and that group, city manager approved it. Yes, that's why we put those in place.
But there's
Now-
a time period too on the event deals.
Yeah.
You couldn't do it every weekend, according to, if I read our guidelines correctly.
Yeah, they can't, yeah, it's not that you do it every single weekend, but guess what? Sweeney Switch throws one this weekend. Somebody else wants to do one the next weekend. Are you gonna deny that organization from doing it? That's where I run into a problem. You know, the once a month thing, I have absolutely no problem with. If it's every week, I would not wanna live in that area, and there are 80 houses right around it, according to the Sweeney Switch study, and there's 100 and some odd that are within a half mile of it, that I know are listening to music that's playing 10 o'clock or later. You know, I'm good with once a month type thing, because it does bring people to the city. And there are people. What I'm not good with is people that post stuff on social media that says, if they don't have an event, I'm gonna be walking the streets drinking beer. You know, I mean, I'm just like, are you serious? We're having events, and we've got events approved, I think. You know, I'm not sure.
We submitted our permits for all of our dates this year.
Right.
Our understanding is they're approved.
They're approved, and you guys are advertising.
Is
So,
that the only time you're planning on opening that up, during the events?
As I said, we would consider if somebody else came and had an event permitted and approved, which the process and proper insurance, we would probably consider letting them use it.
not
Again,
leasing it to
We're
them.
not intending to just openly go out and try to find people to use it by any means. But I think that they should have the same right to try to use it as we do.
Well,
Yeah,
If they are permitted, insured, and go through all the proper channels, much like we're required to do.
right, you wouldn't lease it to them, though, you just let them use it.
More than likely, yes. I mean, certainly for, let's just say the chamber wanted to do one, or the Friends of the Park wanted to do one. I mean, certainly our city entities, we would not charge them for that.
Josh, when y'all did the, St. Patrick's Day, did y'all have the beer things out in the street, or I didn't get to go? How did y'all do that?
When the weather kinda failed on that one, it basically stayed within the lumber shack.
Yeah, I didn't see them out on the.
No,
So
I
when
don't
we
have-
closed the street.
Under normal deal, would you have? is that what y'all
Under the
would've
normal
done?
deal, I would've probably had my food trailer there, maybe somebody else's, the bar area, either the Black Raven, which usually handles that, or the lumber shack, but like at St. Patrick's Day, Scott's got his deal going, he can't manage, we try to bring everybody together, so we're actually not even using the bar,
We didn't use the bar at
we let
St.
Black
Patrick's.
Raven do it.
There
But St.
was
Patrick's
a,
Day,
there was
you
a
couldn't.
beer trailer just outside the entrance of the lumber shack.
Yeah.
And that's also coincidentally close to where the stage was for the music.
It just, that weather for that one wasn't conducive, so
Yeah.
Everything's
we
moved inside.
just moved everything
The
inside
party
and
on
said,
that
this is
one
what
was
it is.
mostly inside the lumber shack because it was chilly, just being honest. Yeah, I think we're also, I was about to say the same thing,
Michelle, you got anything you'd like to add?
Oh, yes.
See these pictures? Right here, these are some pictures, Jeff. It's just trash that's left out in her yard and along the place at all times, and it's beer cans. Her car, you notice, was backed into, and I know that could happen regardless. Her mirror was broke out by somebody filling out and hitting a rock on
Something, I
it,
don't know,
whatever.
maybe somebody shot it or something.
You know.
I end up having to get a new vehicle that I will not plan on having a parking space. Because of that. I'm part of the trash, it's supposed to be a district, you guys don't clean up the trash.
Are you talking about after an event or
No,
all the time?
all the time.
Okay, but, I understand where you're coming from.
Cause they,
We try to help, but
I've been down to Rochelle's.
the swing switch merchants aren't the one putting those trash there all the time.
Well, if the lumber shack wouldn't be there, the trash wouldn't be there.
I can't control whether the lumber shack's there or not.
I understand that.
but there is a lot of trash and after a big.
I walk the street quite often, and because of my business, I intentionally try to pick up
I just took
anything,
pictures
even
yesterday.
stuff that I know isn't coming from my store. I will pick up beer cans, I will pick up random stuff. And I really feel like for the event side of it, we are usually there till 2 o'clock in the morning after the events, picking stuff up.
Well, you say that, I mean, there was a time the trailer sat there at the side of the fire station there for 3 or 4 days, I mean.
I understand
So,
that.
so you say that, I
Later
mean.
addressed, I believe.
Yeah, yeah, I got addressed, but I mean.
But we're talking trash here.
Well, but when we clean up the event, that's everything.
Yeah, but now,
So really, let's get back to,
that's different than what this.
Yeah,
well,
that-
other than hurt the trash,
Yeah.
it's
I
gonna be
live right
left
by
there.
the bar.
Oh, I know.
It needs to be tore down, my opinion, it's trash. It's their noise all the time. I wanna move so bad from this place, that it just needs to be tore down.
I wouldn't wanna live next to it, I mean,
I
personally.
have grandkids, my neighbors have kids, it's just,
Well, I would argue, and I've given it a lot of thought, why don't you buy it and build something?
Unfortunately, in an alley, I don't believe it's capable of being bought.
You can't change that?
Man, that alley runs 22 Lamar Street, so I don't know.
Well-
Do we have any utilities through there, Jared?
At the, where that bar is?
Yeah.
Just on the front curb, that's it.
Yeah, and the other thing is, when I say you can't change that, look at the Sweeney Switch book. They shut off Tim Holt.
Oh, I see that.
So, and there's places that do that, so can you change that to where you could actually do something with it and build there? But, and again, I'm getting off, but I really do just wonder why you wouldn't want, if we could, that they purchase it and build a building there or something that's,
Well, you got the floodplain to deal with there as
yeah,
well.
but,
Man,
again,
I mean, that would probably be a stronger preference.
yeah,
in
I
all
mean,
honesty,
we
but
can't do that right
We
now.
can't do it, so that's why
Not
we're
right now,
offering
but,
to
yeah.
consider a leasing situation.
What's the advantage of that area versus, like I was asking Josh, does he move like one of those pods out there and he sells beer out of that or whatever? What's the advantage of just having that area there?
I mean, it's, the bar building itself lends itself to a little more of a service area, I guess is a good way to put it.
It kind of
It
allowed
could be used
us,
for food too, it could be used for a lot of
basically,
things.
when we set that up, is we try to use that, we have the Friends of the Park selling their cups, giving out the bracelets, checking IDs and all that. We create a zone that you have to be checked before you go in there. And then we put everything around it, so that is say the beer, you've gotta have a bracelet and all that to figure out whether you're gonna get a drink or not. Now, we're not saying you gotta stay in there, but it just give us an area to funnel people and check their IDs and they get the cup that we've got for the event, so you know, they didn't carry this in, this is our cup, they've got the bracelet, so that's what we use it for, is the area to kind of restrict that flow for the age.
And that's kind of a technicality that the.
Far as money-wise, how
requires.
much-
You have the selling of the beer or whatever in a centralized area
Yeah.
that is controlled. So
And
that enables us to.
Police, we get the
And
police
that-
a little easier.
And that, metal hut you have, that
Yeah.
wouldn't serve that purpose.
No, the one that's there, that's the one we sell pretzels out of, hot dogs and
Yeah.
stuff, yeah. Now, Eddie's borrowed one of them and set it in there to sell beer, but it's set as a,
Yeah.
yeah.
By the way, if you lease it, will you make it handicap accessible? By God, it's not
Oh, no, it
handicap
is not.
accessible.
We have to visit with.
I
you
cannot
about
go
that.
in.
You'd probably have to educate us a lot there.
Hey, Greg, you guys kind of police the area a little bit, I mean, you're, like walking all the way down, to Church Street? I mean, have somebody kind of keep an eye on things, if
Do
there's
you mean-
problems.
Yeah, that's not
During the-
leasing, that's not leasing the facility.
No, I'm just asking.
No, I mean, are you talking about during an event? or
Yeah,
are you
during the
talking-
event, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. You guys kind of.
I'll be very honest, my store's open, I'm walking back and forth every 30 to 45 minutes.
We try, Tim, we try to watch, you can ask Marty, I've called him and said, hey, we've got somebody coming in from down the road, it looks like they're drunk, and we don't want that coming into us, and somebody said, oh, them people were drunk, but no, they came in that way.
Well, I'm just asking if you gotta, kind of keep an eye on that stuff, make sure there's no.
Yeah, I mean, we do, I mean, and like I say, at the end of the events, we stay around
Yeah, we're there.
and really try to get it cleaned up. I even go through the parking lot behind Shapes to pick it up after an event. I mean, because people park there and stuff gets carried there, food and drink.
Yeah, but, so we have two different versions of that, but again, that's not about leasing this,
Right.
but she says differently than what you said.
And I think she's also kind of communicated a lot of it's all the time, not just the event.
Right, not just the event.
And I'll agree with that.
I mean, I live right there, I'm tired of the noise, I would not want it every weekend.
Well, and I gotta tell you.
I have dogs and they get sick because people throw stuff in my yard and they get sick.
I drove down, that's the reason why this lease thing, why, a couple of weeks I've been looking at it, and it always looked junky. I'm like, it looks junky all the time.
Well,
I mean-
especially those chairs were ridiculous.
Greg and I talked about it today, he said, those chairs have never been moved down there.
No.
Well, that
So,
now,
And the thing I'm saying right now, they're not our chairs.
Well, how did Sweeney Switch get them?
They're not, those aren't Sweeney Switch chairs.
they have something written on them that they're from some school. There's stuff written on them that says they're from a school.
Well, I think that's.
So we went in there and picked them up, because we agreed, we didn't like them sitting there.
Yeah. Do people do stuff in here when you're not, I mean, are people in here all the time?
Not all the time, but my dogs know when somebody's over there and they're just
Yeah.
constantly barking.
Like the ones that kick in the door and paint the graffiti and stuff like that.
Okay, I'm gonna close the public hearing right now, and we're gonna discuss this amongst ourselves. But quickly, here would be my suggestion at the moment, is before we do anything, I would say that we table this until we talk to the Able Commission and see what their rules and regulations is on that particular, with it being two or three things, one being close to a church, even though it may be a special event. I believe honestly, if they were to do this, that they're looking at opening it up every weekend, is really probably what I'm thinking. And secondly, is it's on an alleyway, which is against our ordinance. So my opinion is that we visit with the Able Commission and look back into some of our own ordinances and see how it falls into place.
Would you be willing to, would you be willing to visit with us and let us be part of that?
I would be, well, I guess I would, I
Yeah.
don't have a problem, but I could call, I don't remember his name, he came out,
I'm gonna call.
okay, and I do too. I know Brandon Clave's the director by all means, but I forgot who came out and visited with us, and it was the Able Commission is very, goodness gracious, you been on that? You been on that, and it is, you need an interpreter, honestly, with that, so I
Trust
would.
me, I know that.
I mean, yeah, and so I'm not trying to be, but I wanna make sure whatever we do would be legal, is what we do.
Wait a minute, legal on leasing that piece? Or are you going back to, is it legal for them to drink that? Cause I think that's a settled issue, I thought. If they have a permit from the Able Commission to do these,
Well,
I thought that's a settled
The
issue.
two, like I said, I'd like to look at it all back on our ordinance, because our ordinance says that you can't. And all these special permits, is that really the way we wanna do that? I mean, if y'all wanna vote, I'll vote. I don't have a problem voting on it.
allowing you to sell it on the street.
I mean, I'll take a vote.
It's a, see, the event permit designates the area. So, just trying to, so the lumber shack has their own liquor license for selling inside the lumber shack. The event license then is purchased and the Able Commission is given the parameters of where the area is. And the event license allows that to extend out there.
So all the alcohol is coming from.
No, it's gotta be bought separately altogether. It cannot come from it can't come from Greg, it can't come from the lumber shack or none of it, they have to buy and have it stamped and permitted. I mean, I visited with them about it. So,
I mean,
Like the beer trailers, usually, I believe the beer comes through Budweiser as a separate purchase.
they have to have their own, my understanding, they have to have their own tax number on it. I mean, it's my understanding. I mean, that's, when we
That,
visited,
I know.
it sounds,
Well, I had a conversation with somebody on that too, and they said that it has to be purchased separately.
that's
Right.
It cannot be brought,
I guess that's why I asked.
but although you offered this thing to do this,
And it would require the special license every week. And there's a cost of at least $250 for every special license. So it's not feasible or logical that we would be doing it every week.
Is there anything the city can do to minimize what's going on to affect your life?
Buy me out. So I can move, I mean, it's terrible.
and she's had.
Even, I talked to the neighbors, I mean,
You know,
I'd love to have investors come in. We got the Sweeney Switch study and everybody was all gung ho for, where are the investors? Where are they? Where are the people that wanna make this thing go? I know you do, and I know you do, but where's the investors on the properties? That we could build some stuff and make it look good.
That somewhat defaults back to some conversation a little earlier in the meeting about commercial development and stuff that isn't happening. I don't know the answer to that, but.
I'm in agreement, but there's a push by the Sweeney Switch to do it. With the study and everything, so.
And the study was just that, it was a study. The talk about, they had in that study closing off 10 holes. Personally, I never see that would ever happen, that part of it. Yes, it was a proposal.
Yeah, I actually liked it. Keep the arrows from coming at me, but I actually liked it, that part of it. I liked the little bridge, and I liked that, I just thought it looked quaint, okay?
It looked good.
I'm not
Yeah.
debating that, the reality of it.
But I found a whole lot of
I have
problems
no
with this.
privacy.
I found a whole lot of problems with the study, and I do think we ought to be able to make it look like Main Street and give these people some relief at some point, so.
So let me set up a meeting, I'll table this till the next meeting, and I'll see if I can get a meeting with the Able Commission, we can sit up here and meet with them, see what our goals are. We go over that at the start.
And I'm not trying to pick apart the research on the Able, because obviously I read the Able constantly with my business. A lot of the stuff where you're talking about having to buy it separately, that's for tastings, not so much for retail.
No, it was retail. When he came out here, it was retail. They kept, his understanding is you cannot take alcohol from the chicken shack or your liquor store.
I
and
can't
sell
do it for sure, I'm not allowed to sell anything off-site.
Okay, but even the lumber shack could not do it, the black, no one can, and then once that's bought and purchased, they can't even put it back into their store. There's certain ways you gotta dispose of it, and I mean, and they can have another event, but it's very it's very complicated.
Yeah, I'll agree, the Able Commission laws are.
And we just had
that,
a 2-hour deal on it, they used to have a.
So why don't, tonight, we're gonna table
Okay.
it. Tomorrow, I'll try to reach out to the Able Commission, see if I can get a time set up, maybe Monday before I get a hold of him. He's always been good to call back.
Yeah.
So, and I'll see what schedule anybody has that we can meet.
Okay.
Okay, then I'll get on. Okay. So we'll table this till the next meeting.
Okay,
Item C. Item D, the discussion possible action to revisit the offer to purchase the city's mobile stage, which was previously on the agenda. And it was previously denied, but go ahead.
I don't know that it was denied, but there was a motion made.
We did not
No,
get a
nobody
second.
seconded the
We did
motion.
not get a second.
There wasn't a vote at all. That being said, it's a similar situation, similar offer. We feel like we could take that and utilize it. We would upkeep it. We would let the chamber, we would let Friends of the Park, the city, anybody use it for free. We would deliver it and set it up. But upkeep it, improve it, again, that takes effort away from the city. You won't have to store it anymore. You won't have to upkeep it. You won't have the labor of delivering it and setting it up, which, to go back to when the fee was set for the stage, the fee, our understanding, was based on what it cost the city to put it there and upkeep it and do that stuff. So it would take away that expense to the city.
So you let the park board was to have a continental park. that will-
But again, it would, kind of a similar thing that I said earlier, permitted, insured events, properly done, we would allow for them to use it, we wouldn't charge them to use it.
So there would be no difference than the city today letting somebody use that stage.
Letting versus charging $750.
$750 because we have to put people out there that cost
Right.
us money.
Right. Yeah, it was your expense.
It's
We're-
an
We would be
expense.
taking that away. You wouldn't have to have people working overtime for that. because
So,
most
so
of
if
them
you
are weekend
delivered,
stuff.
so if you delivered it down to Harrah, is there an expense to the chamber at that time, or y'all gonna
No.
charge them to rent it?
No.
Is that just,
No, that's part of what we want to do as the Sweeney Foot merchants, is help the entities in this town, and that would include something like that. Josh would probably be the one delivering it, but we wouldn't be charging for
Where are you
it.
gonna store it?
We got land spaces.
Yeah, I've got that 7 acres behind the mill.
what's the value of that stage, Jerry?
I couldn't tell you right offhand.
It's a trailer, right?
Yeah.
How big's the trailer?
30 feet, 40 feet.
It's an old mobile home frame, Jeff, that they built over.
I guess my question is, why don't you just build your own?
That
Well,
is
that's-
probably the next option if we can't do this, because we're not gonna pay
No, that's,
$750 for every event. 5 events, that's $4,000.
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, you could buy, you could build one.
right, that's where we're at.
That's where we're at. I mean, it's like, if you don't wanna sell it to us, then we'll probably build one and maybe still offer it to the city and everybody else.
What's your offer to buy it?
We start at 500. I mean, I don't know the city, I believe the Friends of the Park and the city work together on a lot of that renovation. Is that not correct?
The city did all of that.
So,
Before we could do anything on that, we would have to declare it surplus, would be the first thing that we'd have to do before we could actually make a deal. And to do that, I mean, that'd be the legal way to do it. And so if we did that, we would declare it surplus. I don't know if we wanna, we've done the stuff on auction, but we don't wanna auction it, because the reason we don't wanna auction, we came out well on our auctions that we've done on surplus. If we auction it, then somebody in Tulsa could buy it. I'm just, I mean, so we don't wanna auction it off. I mean, we would like to keep it local if we sell it, and I guess if we declare that surplus, we don't have to let it for bid, is that
Well,
correct?
you can sell on a private bid if you do.
Okay, just making sure, so, why don't we see if by next week, if we put it on there, I mean, we do both simultaneously, I believe we can put that, number one, before this to declare surplus, and number two, put it back on there to purchase price, and then we can either negotiate the price there, and maybe Jeff or Steve or myself, or any one of us could kind of see what the value we feel like, and what the value is to everybody, that it's a fair price. The only thing, I know that there's a concert in the park that was supposed to be this weekend, but they canceled it. They haven't rescheduled that. I do know that with the park board, that would definitely have to be something that would be negotiated in the deal as well.
again, back to that same intent that we would not charge for that.
Well,
Yeah.
they're gonna reschedule, so Mountain's gonna reschedule that. So once again, as I'll table this one till the next meeting, and then we'll also, is that okay with you to declare surplus, Jerry? Okay, so let's put that on the next agenda.
Can I just clear up one thing?
Yes.
You said, Jerry, you said you guys did all the refurbishment.
Yes.
My understanding was that somebody else did the refurbishment. I just wanna get it straight in my head. Somebody else did a first rebuild on it when they took it out of a junk status or something
We did that.
and redid it. Well, I was told somebody else did
The
that.
park board was gonna do it.
Yeah, well,
They
it's
didn't
like
get
electric.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
To it, and it was coming after a
You got
bid.
lights and-
The city manager had to increase it.
Really? Okay.
I was on I might be wrong, I was under the impression maybe Friends of the Park to help raise some of the funds for materials or.
I think the Friends of the Park did it kind of the first time, and then it caught on fire or something.
See, that's
and
what
then
I'm talking
The
about.
second time, the city
Well,
did it.
originally, we built it,
I know
Yeah.
that, but
and then
then,
it caught on fire, and that's when they were gonna redo it, but they didn't have enough time, so we ended up redoing it.
okay, I got a little different story. I'll just keep it in my brain for a while until I talk to that person.
I'm much like you, I got a different story.
Yeah, I have a different story than that.
Okay.
One question, how many events you said you ran before?
We have 5 scheduled for the rest of the year, but we would probably be renting it for, if we were renting it.
Okay, so we're gonna table that one until the next meeting.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you for your time.
Item E is discussion of possible action to appoint a representative to ACOG board and an alternate. Tim done that for the last year, go to ACOG and did a good job. I don't know if we wanna reappoint him or not.
Leave it at Steve.
I'll make that motion.
No, only thing I ask is if I do it, I'd like to have someone that's a backup that would be able to go when I'm not able to go. Not say, the backup say, well, they didn't have some, when I didn't go, they didn't put somebody didn't go my place. So, these are important meetings, there's some good stuff comes out of it. And, I think every time we're missing out on some stuff.
I already have 2 other boards.
I'm looking forward to this one too. so-
I mean, what days are they on?
Usually about the,
Once a month, right?
yeah, once in the
Once a month.
that last Thursday of the month.
Schedule.
Okay.
Yes, scheduled.
When's the next meeting? That's
Should
gonna
be
be
next
March
Wednesday?
30th,
March 30th.
okay,
April.
well, so April 27th.
That's next Thursday, and the one after that is,
May 25th.
okay, the last Thursday in the month.
Yes, it's last Thursday of the month. Now, they start at 1 o'clock, and they can last till, unfortunately, they can last till 4:30. Not very often, because there's 3 or 4 different parts to it. And then when people start talking, it could last a little longer, so.
Okay, so we have a motion to appoint Tim and have Jeff as a second, the alternate.
I make a motion.
That we make Tim the head and Jim the alternate. For ACOG.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Pinkowski,
Yes.
Scazzo,
Yes.
Rosowski, Rudick, Trent,
Yes.
motion carried.
Items F and G, I will table until next meeting. I don't think we have anybody, I don't have anybody from the planning commission or department at this time, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, I
Can
should.
you get somebody the name of Smith?
Get the name of ski. You don't want a ski on the end of it? If I get a ski, that, I mean,
Just shorten my name.
Come on.
And be done.
Then, we are gonna jump to, let me see. We're gonna jump to items, actually, before I go to the executive session, I will,
You have, a drawdown on.
yes, that's what I've done, yes. That's what I'm doing. Item B on public works, discussion possible action to draw down number 74, to authorize payment. And that's when taking a drawdown, $67,317.21. That still leaves them a balance of $344,710. And I think we're still waiting on a backup. That's what I think they're waiting on. So, we have.
I'll make a motion to approve drawdown number 74 and authorize payment.
I'll second it.
Scazzo,
Yes.
Rudick,
Yes.
Pinkowski.
Yes.
Rosowski, Trent,
Yes. Item C is discussion possible action on outside entities dumping waste into our sewer system. What that is, Jamie allowed these, call them honey wagons or whatever you want, the suck trucks to come out and suck up sewer out of your septic tank,
You mean like
whatever.
Irwin Septic?
Like Irwin Septic was a good, not them, but other companies did come out, and she allowed them to dump into our sewer system for the same price as a residential customer. There's 2 or 3 things wrong with that problem is, that I see. One is, we don't really know what they're dumping in there. I mean, they could be getting grease out of the grease trap at a restaurant and bringing it out here and dumping it, which does not help our plant by the maintenance of it. Secondly is, we don't know what they're dumping. It could be some hazardous waste as far as we know. And third is, if we're gonna do it, we need to set fees in place that we really not, I mean, that's not what we do. They got places in Oklahoma City that does that on a regular basis, but they're coming out here because they're getting it for a little of nothing, is what they're getting. So I just, let's have a motion that we do not allow any outside dumping.
It's already occurred, and the reason it came up is the utility clerk was not sure how to bill these people. And so that's when the question came up, and I'm like, we don't even have that on the fee schedule, so I don't even know how to charge
Get
this.
in a manual. Yeah.
So,
So I don't think we need to allow any
So
outside.
it's only come up once?
to my knowledge,
I think it's twice.
It's not anything.
One time.
It's not anything that we've ever allowed before.
No.
I don't think we ought to do.
I agree. So we
So
have,
what do
We're
we do?
talking about our sewers.
yeah.
so what do we do about the people that's already done this?
Well, the only thing I know that we can do at this time is bill them for, if we have a commercial rate, bill them for commercial rates. If we don't, bill them for residential, and we're taking the assumption that they had a full truck and it's 3,000 gallons or whatever it is, and
1,200 gallons.
1,200, bill them for that and stop it. That's the only 2 things I can say. I mean, because we just don't want that in our system, with not knowing what they could dump in there. So, and that puts a load strain on our city as well, and, they're coming out here because they're saving money. That's what we do. We have a motion
I make a motion that we do not allow them,
to allow anyone.
allow anyone to dump waste into our sewer system and however she could charge to get the money.
Do I got a second?
I'll second.
Pinkowski,
Yes.
Scalzo,
Yes.
Rosowski.
Yes.
Rudick,
Yes.
Trent.
Yes.
We should actually, after both the motion, be able to speak.
Oh,
I just had a question.
Yes.
So they're pumping our own lift station down there.
Well, that's a different.
Okay.
That's a total, because
Let's
that's.
make sure.
The motion was outside.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's actually our own.
Well, those were outside people pumping.
But they were dumping our own stuff back.
Our own stuff.
Our own stuff. That's the way to say it,
Make
dumping our own
sure.
stuff back. Anyway, so I'm gonna skip over the executive sessions for 1 second, and we're gonna go to, does any council members have any comments?
Oh, I just have one. I went to my big Eastern Oklahoma County Medical Development Authority and got stood up. Didn't even have a quorum. They got me there and there was no quorum because, they had a new mayor elected down there, and so he decided he didn't want to come. Mayor Jones decided he wasn't reelected, so he didn't show up. They didn't tell me that ahead of time. Just so I let you know I got stood up by
Jeff, you have anything? Under that, Kim, Bob, Levi, do you have anything?
Just real quick, just to kind of bring you guys up to speed on the ARPA projects that, we're working on with the Heritage Court, the pavilion. The granite, the installer came out the other day to do the install, we had to postpone that to reduce some countertops and stuff on some support framing and stuff. Still in process, the doors and windows, there was some miscommunication, I guess, with the PO. So we had to kind of redo the PO. They do require a deposit to order that stuff. So we had to rework the PO to provide a deposit. They have been ordered, should be here, they said probably about 4 to 6 weeks. But just to kind of bring you guys up to speed on that.
any staff, Marty, you have anything? Sir. Jerry? Anybody else have anything? Any citizens' comments tonight? Man, it's quiet, I don't know how to deal with this. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We're gonna finish up with our executive session. You're welcome to stay around if you like. The first one is H. I'm gonna open these both at the same time, and we're going to executive session. Item H is executive session for discussion under provision 25-307B2 pertaining to reviewing the update of the firefighter union negotiations. Item I is discussion of possible action on the provisions 25, section 307B1 pertaining to the review of acting city manager, interim city manager, and hiring a permanent city manager. We have a motion to go into executive session.
I make a motion, we go into executive session.
I'll second.
Scalzo?
Yes.
Pankowski?
Yes.
Rosowski?
Yes.
Rudick?